try this again. This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It's Monday. Can you tell? April 13th, 2015. You know, right before the opening of the broadcast, Joe and I were talking, and we decided to play that promo for nuclear showdown in Iran. And I said, well, we'll just wait to open until that gets done playing. And of course, I'll just say it was a senior moment, you know, because it was only like 30 seconds or a minute 30 before I forgot about that. Anyway, tonight, folks, what a great show. This is a live broadcast. Again, it is April 13th, 2015. I'm Doug Hagmann in studio with my son, fellow investigator, fellow researcher, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. And you know, we bring to you the news in 3D, and we bring to you guests who have a great handle on the news, on current events, as viewed through Scripture, biblical prophecy. And tonight is going to be an exceptional night, one, folks, that you're going to want to tell your friends about, listen to. We have as our special guest Mr. Bill Salus. But before we go to Bill, I just want to say that tonight, folks, portions of tonight's broadcast, sponsored by NatureBox. NatureBox, well, they ship great tasting, very tasty, and guilt-free snacks right to your door. They've got over 100 flavors to choose from. You can pick, well, a Big Island pineapple, Asiago and cheddar, the cheese crisps, pistachio power clusters. You'll never get tired. You'll never get bored of snacking again. Try NatureBox for free. That's right, for free. You go to naturebox.com/CFP-radio. That's naturebox.com/CFP-radio. Or simply go to HagmannandHagmann.com and scroll all the way down. And on the left-hand side, click on that, and it'll take you right to the link where you can get those fabulous snacks for free. Well, $2 for shipping, but I'll tell you what, it's well worth it. But tonight we've got a very special program for you. Our very special guest, Mr. Bill Salus. Bill Salus is a guy that, in fact, if you go to HagmannandHagmann.com on the photos section, under Hagmann and Hagmann on the main menu there, you'll see Joe and I and with Bill Salus met him in Orlando last year, and then again this year. What a great guy. And he's written so much, and he's been spot on about so much. Tonight we're going to be talking about Elam, Iran's forgotten prophecy. And I'm just in the process now of putting up his latest article. It's about Elam, Jeremiah 49, and it's Operation Wake Up Call. The prophecies are coming. You'll be able to springboard. You'll be able to go to HagmannandHagmann.com, and then we'll have the link to that article. It's fantastic. At any rate, Joe, I'm going to bring you on. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Looking forward to tonight. Bill Salus is with us. His website, prophecydepotministries.net. Bill, it's great to have you back on.
Hey, it's great to be back with you, Hagmann and Hagmann, and got a lot to talk about tonight, so it's exciting.
Well, I'll tell you what, the prophecies are coming alive, and folks, we had Mr. Salus and I and Joe, we had a conversation earlier today, and God is a long-suffering God. That statement right there, a merciful God in terms of giving us kind of a nudge, a little push, not necessarily a shove, but hey, pay attention. Pay attention to what time it is. Prophecies are coming alive. And as we realize this, well, we can get closer to God and bring other people to God. And something that Mr. Salus said, and Bill, I'll let you open with this. There's this amazing revival of Christians all across the world in places like China and Iran. People are coming to the Word, and it's a fabulous. It's just this massively fabulous event. Talk to us about that.
Well, that is evidence of the long-suffering God you're talking about. That's really the untold Christian story right now. It's not being voiced and publicized as much as it really should. The Lord, because we are so deep into the end times, and one of the evidences of this is the fact that so many people are coming to the Lord through supernatural means, meaning they are outsourced from God himself, evidencing his concerns that none would perish but all would have everlasting life. We're having dreams, visions, miracles, and healings, just to name a few of the supernatural things that are going on in places like Iran and Syrian refugee camps, of course, in China and in India, and Africa, of course, some of the most oppressive places in the world, places where missionaries scarcely even want to go anymore. The Lord is going there. He is meeting these people in their suffering. He's hearing their weepings, their distresses, and he's delivering them through their distresses. And it's really an amazing phenomenon. To me, as you were talking about, this evidence is a couple things. One, that we're living so deep into the end times that the Lord is taking personal measures, personal strides. He's rolling up his sleeve, pouring out his Holy Spirit to accomplish the will of his heart, that none would perish. But also because we're seeing it on such a vast level throughout the world, it's worldwide. I think it evidences that we're deep into the end times, that he's giving mankind the opportunity to know him in power and in love through these means, because there's not a lot of time left. And that's one of the evidences I point to about how deep we are into the end times. The other couple would be that Israel is rebirthed as a nation. That happened 66 years ago, the literal fulfillment of numerous Bible prophecies. At that time, the world hourglass took its final turn. And now the fact is, all the other Bible prophecies, probably the greatest sign that we're living deep into the end times, is that all the signs, all the prophetic signs are converging right now. There's no weapon that hasn't been formed, no national relationship that hasn't been fashioned, or no technology that hasn't been developed that couldn't accelerate rapidly every end times Bible prophecy. When they come, they'll come in rapid succession. And I believe that soon and sequentially, each one coming in, building upon the other one, and the next one that follows will be more powerful. And we can talk about some of the specific ones I'm watching for as the show goes on. But God is long-suffering, but there is a point where his long-suffering will forego the fact that the prophecies are going to happen. And that's the key. Now, what about those prophecies? What are they? And what are they intended to mean to mankind? What is the genuine, real purpose of Bible prophecy? You know, God tells us in Isaiah 46, verses 9 through 10, that he alone is God, and the way he authenticates that, one of the main ways, is by declaring the future as if it's already history, knowing the end from the beginning. And he says, no one else can do that. No other God can do that. No one else can do that. So it's his specific characteristic. But why does he do it? Is it because he's sitting around in heaven twiddling his thumbs with too much time on his hands? No. It's because he wants to give us information that we need to know, because he loves us. And our natural response should be to be thankful to him, to love him, to worship him, and to be in awe. I mean, that he could know the end from the beginning and care enough to give us the information that we need to go through what are going to be world-changing events. And these prophecies, in my estimation, are coming, and that's the nature of the article. And I think it's a wake-up call for mankind in that, hey, there's one true God, folks. And when his word, written centuries ago through these prophets, comes into prophetic application, when it becomes real, when it comes into action before our very eyes, described as the prophet said, what does that tell us? That tells us that he's God, he's the one true God, and that he's the loving God that sent his son Jesus Christ to die for our sins, that none would perish and have everlasting life. So, Bible prophecies are really exciting. They're a witnessing tool. They express God's love, his compassion, his care. They're not doom and gloom. However, they will be to people who don't get it, who don't pay attention to them, that these prophecies sneak up on, and their worlds will be changed. And at that point, they'll definitely need to know about Jesus. That's why we need to get these words and messages out as soon as possible, because I think these things are coming really quickly, guys.
Yeah, and we can go back to prophecies in a second, but I wanted to talk about the Christian growth in these war-torn countries and tyrannical nations that we see. I mean, Syria, I saw some numbers today, 210,000 dead, 1.5 injured or disabled by the civil war that's happening there. China has huge, anti-Christian policies. They tear down churches where growth is happening, yet we see the growth there. All this growth in some of the worst conditions and regions, this is how the Lord is speaking to people, you're saying, is that we know that it says all who believe in the Lord shall suffer persecution. Is this what the Lord is doing, bringing people back to him before things continue to spiral out of control, or until we...
Well, the things you're referring to are undertakings by man's wrath. ISIS is beheading Christians, and Iran is imprisoning pastors and persecuting all Christians. So the Lord is meeting these individuals in these deep hours of oppression at their time of need in their places where they are, in whatever way it takes. In some places, in some instances, a dream will bring someone to the Lord, or a vision, or a healing. He knows what's going to bring each one to the Lord, into the kingdom. The thing that's going on in the Middle East as an example. Let's look at Syria. You brought up Syria. 22 to 24 million. I'm not sure on the number. Syrians. At least half of them have been affected by the revolution that's been going on since March of 2011. Several million, probably 3 to 4 million, have been displaced into refugee camps into the neighboring nations of Turkey and Lebanon and Iraq, and even in Egypt, and a ton of them in Lebanon, Jordan also. Now, those individuals they're in really dire situations, and ISIS is going into some of these places and creating all kinds of havoc. But what else is happening is this unbelievable phenomena of people coming to the Lord. There's people hearing about the gospel in these places that they might not have otherwise heard about if they were in the heart of Damascus, living, the lives they were used to living and stuff like that. And so it's really an interesting situation. One example is they're called the Sisterhood of Widows. It's a gal named Mafida, and she's a widow, and she's in a Syrian refugee camp. And the last I'd heard, she was in refugee camps where there's close to 500,000 refugees in the Turkey area, on the border of Turkey. And there's all these widows who've lost their husbands, primarily lost their families. I mean, their husbands are dead or maimed or lost, or the kids they've lost their amputees. I mean, it's just unbelievable horror and terror situations. And Mafida is going around and reading the Bible to these widows, and they're gathering together in tents, and they're all. I mean, the turnover conversion rate is unbelievable when they hear the good news about Jesus Christ, and so many are coming to the Lord over in those places. She's just one gal doing an amazing work amidst very turbulent times. It's interesting when I spoke recently at a prophecy conference with John Howler and Eric Barger, and John was telling me, and I haven't looked this up yet, but John's real good on checking these things out in research, and he said that there was a time when you could look on a satellite map of the area of Syria, and this was back before the revolution. And I think you can actually check this before and after shot, and you can see at nighttime all the lights on in Syria. I mean, lots of lights throughout the various major cities of Aleppo and Homs, and especially in Damascus. And he said, but now when you look at that same map, half of those lights are out. I mean, the place is in ruins, and there's really no hope or future for it, especially when you understand Bible prophecies. Even worse things are yet to come. The destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17. Isaiah 17:9 actually says many strong cities will be desolated. Now, fortunately, as it is in many prophecies, there will actually be a remnant, a faithful remnant of Assyrians and Egyptians and Iranians and things like that who will come to know the Lord after all the travails, after the tribulation and things like that. But meanwhile, many of them are coming to the Lord right now, and that's what's so important and so critical, and that's the untold story. That's just in Syria. The stories in Iran are unbelievable. Iran is the number one growing evangelical population in the world, growing at a rate of 19.6% per year, according to World Report, which most missionary-minded churches have that manual in their library. Afghanistan is number 2, if you can believe that. And Tajikistan, the third Farsi-speaking country in the world, is number 10. So the 3 Farsi-speaking countries in the world are in the top 10 of Christian evangelical growth right now. It's just an amazing situation. And when they give their testimonies, almost every man or woman, there was a dream involved, a miracle, a vision, or a healing. Now, satellite television reaches in over the heads of the mullahs, especially in Iran. TBN has Najat TV. Hormoz Shariat has Iran Alive Ministries. I think CBN has one too. And the mullahs can't really scramble these shows that much. And it's pretty easy to get a dish and put it in your home. And they're having a profound effect of discipling people and bringing people to the Lord who have had these dreams and these visions and things like that. Really, guys, it's because I was starting to write Nuclear Showdown in Iran, revealing the ancient prophecy of Elam, which is a vastly overlooked prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 34 through 39. I was mainly thinking we've got a nuclear prophecy, another prophecy dealing with the future of Iran, rather than just the one in Ezekiel 38 and 39, that big deal, that Gog and Magog prophecy where Iran's listed in 38:5 as Persia. We've got another prophecy, and this prophecy I think is going to be probably the next prophecy to find fulfillment, written in 596 BC, and it appears to be dealing with the nuclear scenario that the world's so concerned about with Iran. But as I was studying this and doing all my research and writing about it, I had no idea that the Lord was going to lead me into this whole untold, this bigger backstory about this spiritual showdown going on in Iran between Christianity and Islam. It's just an unbelievable situation, guys, and I just hope that the church in America could be inspired by seeing how busy the Lord is personally in these distressed areas.
Yeah, I like this because, and folks, if you go to Hagmann and Hagmann.com, on the front page there, I just put up, and you'll see it. It's Operation Wake Up Call. It links directly to prophecydepotministries.net, directly to Bill's article. But I like it because you write in your article there, and folks, it's a great article to read. You're right, where you came to realize that the Lord is busy in the spiritual battlefield, redeeming the lost through supernatural means. And a lot of times we just kind of, as you said, it kind of takes a back seat to the real gloom, doom, and the troubling prophetic, or the troubling prophecies. And then you write where most of these formerly lost souls live in the world's most oppressive locations and have primarily come to a saving faith in Christ and through supernatural doings. And how great is that? The fingerprints of the Lord are all over these conversions. And I can't, I mean, that to me, in the face of the stuff that you research and we research, boy, that alone takes the weight, the gloomy, oily muck and mire, a lot of it anyway, off of the prophetic elements that we're talking about. So that's fantastic.
Well, you know that when God says in John 3:16 that He loves everyone and wishes none would perish, but all would have everlasting life, you don't have to go too far to realize that He's talking about everyone. He's talking about, you know, anywhere from the most needy to the most wealthy. He loves them all. He loves every one of these 7 billion people on the planet. And that's the message that needs to resonate throughout the church, throughout the pulpits. You know, you can go onto YouTube and you can search healings and miracles and things like this. There's stories of people in India, and they still operate under, you know, paganism, Hinduism. They have a caste system, you know, where you've got different castes of elevations of status in their society, and one of the lowest class, I think the lowest class is called the untouchables, and so many of them are coming to the Lord. You know, they're bred up and believing in reincarnation. That, you know, the reason they're a beggar is because they did so many bad things in past lives, and you know, what a absolute, you know, mockery of Christianity, which says, you know, you live one time. Man is appointed to life one time and then to the judgment. You know, you don't come back and back again. You live one time. But this is how they keep these people in these repressive situations. And you'll see people in the lowest caste system living in cities where there's no electricity, tribal areas, and you'll see a healing take place, meaning that the Lord will go to even the most needy, the most impoverished person on the earth, and show His love and affection for that person, and bring him into the family and the household of God, because there's no difference on the inside of any soul to God. And so, you know, he'll go to places where, like I said, missionaries scarcely go. I mean, you know, in Syrian refugee camps. Okay, well, ISIS presently controls territories in northern Syria and northern Iraq, and that's the land they controlled. It was controlled by ancient Assyria back around 3,000 years ago when Psalm 83 was written, roughly around the time, of course, when Jonah also was, he was a little bit sooner, late, you know, in the 700s, I believe it was, or whatever. He was supposed to go to Assyria and warn of their judgment in Nineveh. Remember, the story of Jonah. So Jonah didn't want to go there. Because back then, if you remember the story, back then he was to pronounce judgment on the Assyrians, who were so barbaric. I mean, they would behead people. They would put people out on spears out in front of the area. So said, don't bother us, because this will happen to you. This will be your fate. It was sort of like ISIS revisited. I mean, ISIS is revisiting that, and Jonah didn't want to go there. But the Lord's going there. The Lord's going to places even Jonah wouldn't go. He's meeting these people in these desperate places, these desperate conditions, and these people are just getting it, and they're coming to the Lord in groves.
Man, that is great news. If we can take a step back and go look at some of your previous books, Israelistan,
yeah,
Psalm 83, Gog and Magog, and now Nuclear Showdown in Iran. What have we seen unfold since your first book, or since Israelistan till the Nuclear Showdown? What has changed in the Middle East, or what has changed with these countries and Israel and their relationship?
Right. Well, the nature of those books, just so I'll give a little bit of the content in a summary to the listeners who aren't familiar with them or me. Israelistan was my first book. It came out in 2008, and the central theme of it was the Psalm 83 prophecy, the concluding Arab-Israeli war, written about by Asaph the seer. We're told he was a prophet in 2 Chronicles 29:30. He wrote Psalm 83 around 3,000 years ago, and it's dealing with this concluding Arab-Israeli war, which has not found fulfillment yet. And it looks like it could be finding fulfillment in the very near future, because land for peace deals are not going to be effective. Diplomacy, when it fails, wars begin. And land for peace deals are not biblically endorsed. That's not how the Arab-Israeli conflict is going to be resolved according to prophecy. It's going to be resolved through war. And that's how many circumstances and problematic issues have been resolved throughout time. Diplomacy is great when it can work, but when you've got people who won't even recognize the right of Israel to exist, what do? I mean, Israel's going to have to defend itself, and there will be a war. That was Israelistan, and that book came out and caught a lot of attention. Hal Lindsey, Chuck Missler, Dr. David Reagan, you guys as well, many other people started thinking, well, what is this Psalm 83, overlooked prophecy? So it sort of put Psalm 83 on the map. It was revelation of a vastly overlooked prophecy relevant for our time. That book later was upgraded after the Arab Spring in 2013 with a book called Psalm 83, The Missing Prophecy Revealed, which about 70% of Israelistan was moved over into the Psalm 83 book, along with a lot of whole new bunch of new information. That book was, of course, been a bestseller since it came out, and that is also dealing with Psalm 83 and other things. But the Lord, I felt recently, my latest book in 2014 is Nuclear Showdown in Iran, Revealing the Ancient Prophecy of Elam. And it's dealing with another vastly overlooked prophecy. There's only 6 verses, but they're very, very prophetically powerful, very, very timely and relevant for our time, in my estimation. And that is dealing with, I believe, Iran's nuclear program. It deals with a disaster. It says that Iran, Jeremiah writes his prophecy in 596 BC, even before Ezekiel wrote his prophecy about Iran as Persia, which was probably written about 10 years after Jeremiah wrote this prophecy about Elam. And he's talking about an entirely different prophecy than Ezekiel was talking about. And when most of the people who study Bible prophecy try to understand what's the future of Iran and Bible prophecy, they gravitate towards Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is a very powerful prophecy. And that's a big deal. But they haven't been paying attention, quite frankly, to this prophecy of Elam, which I believe precedes Ezekiel's prophecy and sets the way up for many other prophecies, probably the destruction of Damascus, probably Psalm 83, and then ultimately Ezekiel 38's prophecy. And I believe it's dealing with, it says that the Lord gets extremely angry. Jeremiah is telling us in 596 BC that there's going to come a point in time when the Lord is going to be really, really angry. And he's going to be really, really angry with Iran, because Elam, E-L-A-M, is in modern-day Iran. It's where Iran hugs the Persian Gulf over there, where the Bushehr nuclear province is, where the Bushehr nuclear reactor is, their first operational nuclear reactor. And that represents about 1/5 of modern-day Iran, and Persia represents the other 4/5. And it says there's going to come a time when God's going to be steaming at Iran. And then you realize, as you read the prophecy, he's upset with them because they've got really bad leadership in place. because it says that the leadership is going to be destroyed. He says he'll destroy from there the kings and the princes. And you don't destroy good leadership. You don't destroy good governments. The Lord's a compassionate, loving God. But bad leadership is going to be destroyed. And you look throughout the history over the last 2,500 years, and all the details of this prophecy have never really been met. However, they're being met right now. The conditions are totally ripe for the fulfillment of this prophecy, a literal fulfillment of a biblical prophecy, which I believe could happen really, really soon, any morning, maybe this year. Maybe, we don't know. Sometimes it could be a couple years, but it really looks like the stage is set for this particular prophecy, which I think will even happen before Psalm 83, to find fulfillment. And then you say, well, why is he angry, so angry, that he would bring about a disaster? It says his anger is going to actually bring about a judgment, which will eventuate into a disaster in the region over there, in the area. And you find out the reason he's upset is this bad leadership wants to launch something somewhere, because it says he's going to break their bow at the foremost of their might. He's going to prevent this bad leadership from being able to accomplish their will to launch something such that you use a bow for somewhere. And I believe that somewhere is Israel. I believe that this leadership in Iran that wants to get a nuclear weapon, and they want to shoot it at Israel. They want to destroy Israel. They've made real clear their intentions to wipe Israel off the map. Ayatollah Khomeini, as well as many of the mullahs, as well as former Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, they've stated their intentions quite clearly. Israel takes their intentions quite seriously, and Iran is wanting to get a nuclear weapon. And that's a real problem. The Lord would be angry with that, because he's going to uphold his holy name in the midst of his people Israel, so that it can be profaned no more, that the nations will know he's the Lord. That's in Ezekiel 39, verse 7. That is Gog of Magog prophecy. In the latter days, God's going to stop it, not America, not the IDF. He's going to stop it with fire, hailstone, and brimstones. It's the most massive Mideast invasion of all time. It's going to come. It's getting stage setting to come real soon, and God's going to stop it. And when he stops it, he'll be able to clearly state, it'll clearly be understood, hey, he's the Lord. He just upheld his holy name through the midst of his people Israel. Now, if before that prophecy happens, Iran gets their hands on a nuclear weapon and destroys Israel, that would be real problematic for the Lord, because how's he going to uphold his holy name in the midst of his people Israel if there is no Israel? And that's exactly what's on the threat table right now. Iran is messing with fire. And the other problem that's going on with Iran is the fact that there's a spiritual revival going on that's unprecedented. They think there could be close to 5 million Iranians in a country with, I think, 75 to 80 million people that are coming to Jesus Christ in multitudes rapidly. And it's such a problem for the mullahs over there that Ayatollah came out a few years ago and issued a decree that all home churches would be shut down, all pastors would be imprisoned, and all Christians would be persecuted. And that's the policy in Iran. And that's a problem. That's why you got guys like Pastor Saeed Abedini imprisoned for, I think, a couple of years now. His wife Nagma was over here trying to get on Fox and CNN, trying to tell people, we need to get my husband out. And, of course, he's not the only one. And it's a real bad situation. The Lord's bringing people into the household of God, and Iran, under the influences of Satan and Islam, is trying to put the brakes on that. And so God's efforts are meeting with the harshest resistance. And
wow.
I believe that's really where we're at right now.
Well, and that's a good thumbnail sketch of exactly where we're at. Folks, we're talking with Mr. Bill Salus. I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bill Salus is quite active on the lecture circuit. He's very much in demand, talking about this very, very topical subject, of course. And, I mean, look at the headlines, and you can understand why Bill is such a draw to numerous venues. And you know, Joe and I were talking, Bill, earlier before airtime, and we were talking about the first time that we had you on, and you talked, with Israelistine, and just how you laid everything out in that book, and then of course Psalm 83, and then the missing prophecy revealed, Psalm 83, and then of course now nuclear showdown in Iran. It seems to me like you are constantly, as events evolve, you're connecting prophetic utterances, your biblical prophecy with current events, and really falling into place. And even I just want to mention this, and I know it sounds like I'm shotgunning here, but what really intrigued me about your newest work, Nuclear Showdown in Iran, you even addressed the overview of Ezekiel 38:39 with respect to Ukraine, Putin to fulfill Bible prophecy with Ukraine action. So, I mean, this is a really wide, far-reaching topic and a very interconnecting prophecies. I just, it's just amazing how you've really put this together. And really, this Elam prophecy was newly developed, last year? Or I shouldn't say newly developed, but you really kind of developed it. It's only been about a year or so.
Yeah, written 596 BC, and Psalm 83, 3,000 years ago. Of course, most all these prophecies were written back a couple thousand years back, 2,000 to 3,000 years, and they were intended to be, to find fulfillment at some point in time. Now, of course, when the prophets wrote back then, they had to issue prophecies that would happen during their lifetime. We'll call those near prophecies, near to find fulfillment in their lifetimes. And when they found fulfillment, as specified, that authenticated the prophetic office of the prophet. So therefore, when he would issue other prophetic utterances that were clearly not for his time, they should be treated as well, that was an authenticated prophet of God, and his information will find fulfillment literally as specified. And so a lot of these prophecies were intended for our generation, guys. And then, so the situation is, they have to be revealed in time, before they occur, so that people can have the information necessary to prepare for the events, to give glory to God, and appreciate the whole prophetic process. And so right now what we're finding is that many, many Bible prophecies that have been sort of in the archives are being dusted off, looked at more closely, and the Lord, through his Holy Spirit, is revealing these prophecies so that people can understand. And it all starts to make sense right now. So, for instance, Psalm 83 says that the nations surrounding Israel will want to come together and destroy the nation of Israel, that the name of Israel can be remembered no more. Well, if you want to destroy an Israel, that means there has to be an Israel in existence. And if this prophecy hadn't found fulfillment before there was no Israel in 70 A.D., then it had to be find fulfillment when there would someday be another Israel. So here's the point. The point is it was never fulfilled, and it couldn't have been fulfilled between 70 A.D. and 1948 A.D. because there was no Israel to destroy. But there is an Israel now, and so therefore this prophecy makes a lot of sense. Now, the Arab states, of course, have terrorist populations within those states now. You'd have Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and of course then you've got ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Palestinians, Muslim Brotherhood. Maybe who knows exactly who's all going to be involved in that, but they appear to be the groupings written about 3,000 years ago by Asaph. And these are the states, the Arab states, that actually voted against Israel becoming a nation in 1947 at the United Nations. They are the Arab states that came against Israel in 1948 when it became a nation. They are the Arab states that have now terrorist populations that hate Israel. They're the Arab states that won't recognize Israel's right to exist. I mean, it's really clear that this prophecy is in the process, and it's gonna happen. And so you find that also with Iran. In Jeremiah 49, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense. It talks about when the bow is broken in Elam in Jeremiah 49, verse 35. It then says in verse 36 that he's going to bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven, the Lord will do this, and scatter the Elamites toward all those winds. And it says there'll be no nations, plural, where the outcasts of Elam will not go. So in other words, whatever happens when the bow is broken at the foremost of its might, it creates a worldwide dispersion of the affected indigenous population. What could cause such a thing? Well, it sounds like a humanitarian crisis. Well, perhaps a nuclear scenario. I mean, right now, if there was a strike on the Bashar nuclear reactor there, which is built where three tectonic plates converge, It's already a known conclusion. It will be an epic biblical nuclear disaster, not only to Elam, but the Arab states across the Gulf, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperative Council. They are so concerned about an earthquake that could create this scenario, or a strike upon the nuclear facility, because 2/3 of the world's desalination plants for water, drinking water and potable water, are right there in that Persian Gulf area in those Arab states. They're so concerned that there was a huge earthquake in April of 2013, and it killed like 37 people and injured 850 right at the Bushehr nuclear province. I think it was like a 6.3 or 6.8. And so the Arab states got together over there, the GCC, and the GCC would be Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, Qatar. They got together and put together this expensive, vast, extensive study about what would happen to them, their populations, in the event of a nuclear disaster across the Gulf, which at its narrowest point is 21 nautical miles, through which 1/3 of the world's oil still comes through. And what they decided, and they issued the report in July of 2013, was that they felt that, matter of fact, I have the actual quote right here. I'm going to read it to your listeners because it's incredible what the conclusion they came up with. It's best if I just quote it for them because it's astounding. It says here that it came out with Al Arabiya News. It says, and this is July 24th of 2013. Headline: Iranian radiation a threat to GCC water security. And here's the main quote: the risk of radiation from Iran's Bushehr nuclear power plant, if there is an accident, is extremely high to the GCC states. Studies suggest that any leak from the plant will affect the GCC's water supplies, especially desalination plant operations. In the event of a radiation leak, clouds of radioactive material will drift to the GCC states in just 15 hours. That's 15. That's not 50. That's 15 hours. While the radiation would affect only about 10% of the Iranian population, in the GCC states, it's expected 40 to 100% of the population would be adversely affected. So the reason they can say that, one is, first of all, the wind patterns get the fallout real quickly over there, the water, the way the wind moves the water over there real quickly. The reason I think only 10% would be adversely affected is there's this Zagros mountain range that has always been a geographical barrier between Elam and Persia that is right there in Elam. It's at 550 miles or long and 150 miles wide, these mountains. It'd serve as a hedge for the radioactivity, but it would not stop the winds from blowing it over into the GCC countries. So they decided what they were going to do. By 2020, they want to build the world's longest pipeline inland, 1,242 miles, with a cost of $10.5 billion. And it's not for oil. There's all that oil over there. It's not for that. It's for their water, because they're so concerned about this Bushehr nuclear plant. So would it make sense that there could be a breaking of a bow in Iran, bow and arrows and whatever, centuries ago, that would create a worldwide dispersion? I mean, maybe there'd be imprisoning and taking out to different nations and all that, but not really. I mean, it makes more sense right now that we're talking about something that could happen right now that would instantly create a need for people to vacate and get out into the nations of the world. And we're not talking about a isolated scattering, like you're seeing with the Syrian refugee camps. There's a scattering or dispersion going on in Syria because they've got to get out of the battle zone, but they're not going to every nation in the world. It says, in Elam's prophecy, there'll be no nations where the outcasts don't go. That's worldwide versus what we're seeing in Syria.
Wow. All right. Wow. That's a very foreboding scenario, which you just referenced there. Bill, I don't know if you can answer this. I know that you have dialogue with Joel Rosenberg, and one thing that I've always wondered about. Here we are in 2015, and Iran has seemingly surpassed that red line as referenced by Mr. Netanyahu with respect to the indigenous ability to create nuclear weapons. We knew about the Iranian nuclear threat a decade ago, longer than that. why did we wait? Why have we waited? When I say we, I'm talking about the world. Why wasn't there something done a lot sooner to bring us to this point?
Well, basically, Israel. The greater question is why Israel hasn't done anything yet, because I think they're about to. But let's get back to your question. Benjamin Netanyahu has been warning about the greatest threat to Israel's existence being Iran and its nuclear program well over a decade. I can remember him coming over and speaking with George Bush in 2005, warning about this very issue. And when he came and spoke at Congress on March 3rd this year at the invitation of John Boehner, what did he talk about, guys? I mean, he talked for about an hour. Did he talk about the Palestinians, those poor Palestinians? Did he talk about ISIS? No, he didn't spend one moment talking about any of those. He talked about the one biggest threat he's been trying to warn people about for over a decade, and that's Iran's nuclear program, put in the hands of a rogue regime that wants to spread its tentacles throughout the Middle East, spread its hegemony, put a Shiite caliphate in place over the Sunnis that are there. They've already got tentacles in Lebanon. They got the Hezbollah in Iraq. They've got they've got Baghdad under control, in Syria with the Bashar Assad. Now they got the Houthis running around in Yemen, control of the capital there in Sana'a. This is where we're at. Iran is moving forward, and because now it's a problem, threats of terrorism have been launched internationally by their state sponsorship of terror. The fact they've threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, they want to get a nuclear weapon, they're threatening to wipe Israel off the map. For all these various reasons, now the international community has gotten involved. But they primarily got involved in November of 2013 when President Barack Obama hailed the victory flag like, hey, listen, Iran's going to halt their centrifuges, which is not technically what they did, but that's what he said. And we had some sanctions on them. We're gonna, work around and negotiate with the sanctions and all that. And it was really a big victory he felt for his foreign policy, which has been failed miserably in every other aspect. I mean, with what's going on in Egypt, with the Syrian red lines with their chemical weapons, the Palestinian peace talks with John Kerry and the Israelis fell flat on their face in April of 2014. So, he thought there was something really neat here. So they went and talked it out, negotiated with Iran until July of 2014, couldn't come up with any results, at which point the sanctions were supposed to be strict and held in place, but instead Iran was released about $4.6 billion of frozen cash assets, and they got away with murder on that one. And then they went into November of 2014 to talk again, they couldn't come up with anything there. So they now have extended again until this year. This is the third time. And, of course, they got frozen assets given to them again after November of last year. And so now they come up with this deal that's going to have to be put into application if they can put it together. It's the framework only at this point. And it's even worse than Israel suspected. It's going to enable Iran to keep their nuclear facilities in place. Iran has come out already saying once we get this deal accepted, we expect all sanctions to be lifted immediately. We are planning on developing the most advanced centrifuges we can imagine. We will not allow any inspections at our military facilities and installations. It's like the makers of chess, the creators of chess, have been negotiating their way into a nuclear arsenal. That's where we're at, and Israel's going to have to take an action because it's clear at this point America won't, not with the president we've got.
Man, we see in the news what you just spoke about, the nuclear deal, quote unquote, that Obama just laid out, and I see that the Iranian leadership calling Obama a liar with devilish intentions. I believe that was last week, putting out papers and quotes saying that the fact sheet Obama put out was a bunch of lies and spin. Yeah. And they're asking for a new fact sheet. Today they're talking about deal or not. Many U.S. states will keep sanctions grip on Iran. And we see ISIS growing in the Middle East. And you talked about this, bad leadership. Which country would you say is the primary funder of ISIS, if there is one? Is it Saudi Arabia? Is it Iran?
Well, I don't believe it's Iran or Saudi Arabia. ISIS grew out of the vacuum of bad leadership after, in Iraq primarily, and Syria, the revolution that was going on in Syria. And they're very smart. And they saw an opportunity to go in and sort of take over those territories. And as they took over certain territories, especially in northern Iraq, that's predominantly Sunni territories up there. Now, after we pulled out, America pulled out of those areas, it left this huge vacuum because the leadership that was in place with Nouri Maliki was a Shiite leader. And he didn't feel confident that he could work with Barack Obama as he did with George Bush. And so he started leaning more and more towards getting advice through his counterpart across the Gulf, Iran, the Shiite country Iran. And he started implementing Shiite policies and trying to force them down the Sunni throats. And so the Sunnis in the northern part of Iraq became very susceptible to, ISIS coming into the situation. And when they came in, and they pretty much just folded like flies. And then that enabled ISIS to go ahead and take over banks and lots of millions of dollars and weapons and military equipment we had there. So they've sort of been self-funding themselves. They're very, very well versed in the social networks as well. And really what they offer to the disenchanted Sunnis over there in the Middle East, which is a war zone that's imploding everywhere, is maybe the final chance to have a Islamic caliphate that is led by the Sunnis. There hasn't been one since the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1917. And you're probably going to see, if they go unchecked, groups like Al-Qaeda and others. You're already seeing some join with them, Jabhat al-Nusra and the group out in the Sinai, terrorist organization, Anwar al-Bayt, I think they're called. You might see Hamas. I mean, they present an opportunity for these groups who are Sunnis to perhaps have a caliphate over there. I mean, it's a very dangerous situation.
Okay. Yeah, well, obviously it is. Wow. Well,
I would say this also, though. I want to add this, if I can, not to interrupt,
sure.
But, I think your listeners need to understand a real basic principle here, and that is when Ayatollah Khamenei, the original Ayatollah who came into power after the Shah was deposed in 1979, he had come out shortly thereafter, and he called Israel the little Satan and America the great Satan. And those names, those labels have stuck in the Islamic world, especially the terrorism aspect of the Islamic world. And when we think about it, why is Ayatollah Khamenei, the successor of Ayatollah Khamenei, calling Barack Obama a deceiver? Well, he thinks he's in great Satan. I mean, there's a reason why these world leaders, when they do meet with our leaders, they won't shake their hands, because it's like, the mullahs and Ayatollah will look at them like, why are you shaking Satan's hands? They literally look at us that way. So when, they come out and, he's got to play to his audience over there, Ayatollah Khamenei. He's got the mullahs there, just like, not to make the same comparison, but just like Barack Obama's got to, he's got to deal with the House of Representatives and the Senate now, which is controlled by the Republicans. There's all these different factions in play. So Ayatollah Khamenei, he's got to play his best card. He's got to be strong over there, and the sanctions have to be all lifted immediately. We've got to be able to keep these guys out of our military installations, and don't listen to what Barack Obama and John Kerry and the Western world is saying. They're all deceivers and liars. This is how it's going to play out. This is a deal. Excuse my French, from hell. I mean, this is not going to work, because what's going to happen is Israel's going to have to take matters into their own hands, and Israel will, and they have. Israel struck Iraq's nuclear facility, I believe it was in 1981, in the region of Osirak, and they struck Syria's in 2007 in Al-Kipar, I think it was called. I suspect there's a really good possibility that Israel's going to do a major strike, but it gets very complicated, because this is not an easy scenario. Iran's got over 8 facilities that are very dangerous, and how's Israel going to accomplish that? You might end up seeing some major situations, like for instance an EMP, which would protect Israel's ability to get over there and do what it's got to do. Israel apparently has the ability, or is working on the ability to do such a thing. So, guys, I'm concerned that the fireworks are going to come loose over there. And when they do, I believe now we're going to see Pandora's box opened, and we're not going to be able to put the lid back on it.
Wow. Okay. And I got to say this, Bill. Just looking at the emails coming in, questions for you, pages upon pages upon pages of emails through Hagmann and Hagmann.com, the contact us form. So many questions from people, and so much concern that we're seeing from our listeners about this very situation. So the interest is there. Obviously, I mean, the eyes of people in really the world are on precisely what you're talking about. One of I see an overriding theme here, or so it seems. One of the questions that a lot of listeners have, and perhaps this is out of order, but let me just toss this in there. Why, prophetically speaking, has it been prophesized, or how would you weigh the Obama regime's abandonment of Israel in terms of Bible prophecy, where Israel's got to go it alone, or even America being somewhat antagonistic toward Israel? Where does that fall into Bible prophecy?
Well, it could, and we know in Bible prophecy that ultimately anti-Semitism rises. It says ultimately in the tribulation in the Armageddon campaign, that the Antichrist assembles all armies against Israel, and so we know it's headed in that direction. There's different theories on America. If we're in Bible prophecy, I actually cover that in my books and also in a DVD called America and the Coming Prophetic Wars. Some would teach that America's got to kind of fall down in the limelight of superpower status because the EU, I subscribe somewhat to this, has to emerge, the revived Roman Empire out from which the Antichrist would come according to Daniel 9. Some teach that, and so we might be seeing that as a result of that. Ultimately, also Israel has to take its focus off of anybody protecting it as a nation other than God. They used to have that problem all the time with Egypt, right? And They can't rely on America to be their protectorate. The focus will ultimately be on God preserving Israel. That's what the whole thing with Ezekiel 38 is all about. When it says Russia, Gog of Magog, we believe that would be Russia, as the leader of a consortium. It talks about nine members altogether in Ezekiel 38, verses 1 through 5. That come against Israel in the latter days when Israel is dwelling securely in the midst of the land without walls, bars, nor gates, and they're coming for Israel for plunder and booty. And it's such a formidable advance. That's why we have to be careful about what Russia's doing right now. Vladimir Putin, we need to watch him. He's possibly a prophetic character here. He could perhaps be Gog, which is sort of the title of the leader. And we don't know, but we're watching him closely. They're going to be so formidable at the point in time when the invasion happens that America can't stop them. I believe America is in that prophecy in verse 13 as the young lions of Tarshish. It talks about Sheba, Dedan, the merchants of Tarshish and their young lions. Sheba would be Yemen, Dedan would be Saudi Arabia, the merchants of Tarshish. There's a couple arguments. I favor the one that would be the UK, and the young lions or the young colonies would be, America and possibly some others that came out through the loins of the UK. But we're sitting there in that prophecy. We're not fighting with Russia, thank God, but we're not protecting Israel. We seem to be standing idly on the sidelines going, what are you doing, Russia? And it talks about merchants of Tarshish, meaning it's not talking about the athletes or the politicians or the entertainers or the soldiers. It's talking about an entity that wants to have commerce with a very wealthy Israel, merchants, and the young lions. So someone's wanting to have commerce with Israel, but Russia's coming to confiscate that with its big coalition. And it's so formidable that God has to stop it, to fire hailstone and brimstone, we're told in Ezekiel 38, verses 16 through Ezekiel 39, verse 6, I think it is. And so the point being is that it says, and when that's done, Ezekiel 39, verse 7, I have uphold my holy name in the midst of my people, Israel, that the nation shall know I am the Lord. They shall not profane it anymore. Israel and the nations are going to know that God's the protectorate of Israel. And so, not America. So I don't think we should be surprised to see that America is feigning away from Israel. It's not a good thing for this country, because God has foreign policy about how people respond to Israel. That's in Genesis 12, verses 2 and 3, where if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. If you curse Israel, you'll be cursed. And, the country, America, has kicked God out of this country a long time ago. We've got abortions about 1 million a year. We're roughly approaching the 60 million mark since 1973. Homosexuality's hit the streets here. There's no reversing this trend at that point. But when you start cursing Israel and asking them to take one for the team, like allowing Iran to get a nuclear weapon and let them shoot one at you, or when you're trying to get them to trade God's promised land for a peace with entities that want to wipe you off the map and won't even recognize your right to exist as a Jewish state, that's a problem. And that's the final straw. And God's going to judge the country. As a matter of fact, I believe he already is. And so, America's in trouble. And if we don't help Israel, and if we continue to put pressure on Israel, Barack Obama has created the most tension between Israel and any other president in the history of this nation. And so, he's playing with fire, just like Iran is playing with fire, because God has got big plans for Israel right now, and the clock is ticking. And I believe we're so close to the end times right now that we're actually going to see the fulfillment of a literal prophecy, maybe prophecies plural. And I think that's going to be God's wake-up call. That's the nature of the article you were pointing to earlier in the conversation. What is it going to take for a world that is vastly asleep as to there being one true God? What is it going to take for that world to be awoken? And it's going to be the prophetic word coming into application, coming into action, becoming a reality. Something predicted ages ago that's going to manifest in our generation, I think very soon, that's going to point toward only one thing, and that's there's one true God who knew this was coming. And he wants us to know about it, not because he's trying to show off, but because he's trying to show up and show up in our lives and tell us he's God, because he loves us, is concerned about what's going on, because it's going to get worse from there.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Bill. If you hold on, we're going to take our break right now. We'll be back after a few short minutes and a quick word from our sponsors. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, April 13th, 2015. Our guest is Mr. Bill Salus. His latest book is Nuclear Showdown, Prophecies of a Gentleman. That was a commercial, if you weren't listening, for Bill Salus's latest book, Nuclear Showdown in Iran, and he is our guest tonight. He is his website is prophecydepotministries.net. He has a number of books that we just love here, and we have read these last three: Israelistine, Psalm 83, and the Nuclear Showdown in Iran. Three fantastic.
Got them right on my desk here too,
yeah,
actually.
And he's looking through them. Bill, if I can ask you, in your latest book, Nuclear Showdown in Iran, what is one of the number one things you've learned or that has come to pass since you've written the book, or that's most surprising to you in that book?
Well, everything still seems to be pointing, and I couldn't put my finger on one thing because everything is coming together. Iran is moving rapidly forward with this nuclear program, and the negotiations are coming to a climax. Meanwhile, Israel's flexing its muscles, preparing probably to strike Iran. Another thing that came out recently with Israel is that they're getting released to them an order they procured for another nuclear-capable submarine. They've already got 4. This will be the 5th. They've been coming out of Germany. They've got a 6th coming. They expect to be by 2017. Another way to launch missiles into wherever they've got to launch them. Everything's coming together for the fulfillment of this Bible prophecy. I think the greatest thing that astounded me, I mentioned earlier in the first hour, is this movement in the Middle East, and especially in Iran, through miraculous doings of the Lord, supernatural doings of people coming to Christ. And so problematic that, Iran is trying to stop it. And so you get this major situation. there's like an angelic conflict that we're dealing with here. We're told in Ephesians 6 by the Apostle Paul that, we don't wrestle with flesh and blood, but we wrestle with this angelic conflict, with principalities and spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places, the fallen angels, if you will. So you've got this spiritual battle going on right now that's being manifested through this hatred, Islam versus Christianity, ISIS trying to kill Christians, Iran trying to persecute them. Also, they hate Israel. These are the people of God. In the Old Testament it was the Jews, in the New Testament it's the church. However, we're grafted into the chosen people, the Jewish people, the promises God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So there's really no separation here, technically speaking. God is trying to do things through Israel, and he's trying to do things through the church. Ultimately, the church is going to be taken out of here, and Israel will be the centerpiece of all end times Bible prophecy. That's why there has to be an Israel in the end times. And so you've got this conflict going on. It's coming to a big head. And, you opened the show by talking about God being so long-suffering. How much longer can he endure? All this stuff that's going on over there, how much more chaotic can it get? And, I write in the article that you're talking about that, for the longest time, having studied these prophecies, Psalm 83 and Jeremiah 49 and stuff with Elam, I've wondered and prayed countless hours at night times, Lord, how long are you going to allow the enemies of Israel to get away with this ridiculous hatred and cursing and attempts against Israel's existence and that sort of thing? And my response is, what part of I'm a long-suffering God do you not get, Bill? That's what I really felt his message to me was. And then as I started to write Nuclear Showdown in Iran, Revealing the Ancient Prophecy of Elam, it started to make more sense to me what that message was. In other words, look what God is personally doing. He is bringing millions in the most oppressed situations into the family of God. He's doing it personally. Yes, there's satellite television. Yes, there's the internet where a lot of these guys can go on and try to get biblical studies. Fortunately, some of these things are translated into their native languages, and they can get that on the internet. They certainly have a hard time getting Bibles into Iran and Syrian refugee camps and things like that, hard copies. But at least for those that have the ability, and many don't, a lot of them are very impoverished in these places, they can at least get some teachings from the Word of God and that sort of thing. But the primary way is God is personally doing it through supernatural means. But now when I pray, guys, and this is the concern I've got, I'm not getting such a calming response anymore that, part of a long-suffering God don't you get. I'm getting a concern that, these prophecies are not going to be postponed indefinitely. They are in the Word of God. Unless the Word of God be rendered null and void, they will find fulfillment. And my concern is they're going to find fulfillment in the near future. One of the reasons that's putting that burden on my heart right now is the Lord has had me the first part of this year with a couple key prophetic voices, Jonathan Cahn and Mark Belts. We've been together 3 different times, at least. We've been on several different TV shows. And, these guys are carrying a very sense of urgency in their messages. Mark Belts wrote about the 4 blood moons. And we're in that period of time where these blood moons are taking place. We just had our 3rd one on April 4th on Passover. And I'm not going to get into a whole study about what are the blood moons. Hopefully most of your listeners have heard about them and why they're potentially significant. But we've got another one coming up this year on the Jewish Feast Day of Tabernacles. It's a super blood moon. I don't believe that's ever happened where you had a full lunar eclipse when the moon is at perigee, its closest point on the Earth to the Earth in its rotation. And it's going to look like a blood moon, and it's going to be seen by Israel on Israel's holiday, the Feast of Tabernacles, their Jewish holiday. So, whether that's significant or not, I think it is. But, there's certainly a sense of urgency that's being created by his work. Then you got Jonathan Cahn coming along, best-selling author, sold over 2 million copies of his book, The Harbinger, which is basically unheard of in the short period of time it's been out, only a couple of years. New York Times bestseller for months. He's got a new book out called The Shemitah, which he's concerned that this Shemitah coming up, we're in a Shemitah year right now, the 7-year cycle. God would deal with Israel through these cycles of years. And the 7th year, we're in it, and it culminates on the 29th of Elul on the Jewish calendar, which I believe is September 13th, if I'm not mistaken, of this year. The last 2 of these, on 29th of Elul, had adverse effects to America's economy. One was on September of 2008, and the stock market on the 29th of Elul had its worst day in our nation's history. It dropped 777 points. The bell wouldn't even ring at the stock market. It's a very unheard of situation. Then the 7 years before, the Shemitah before that, the 29th of Elul, was on September 17th of 2001, and the stock market dipped 684 points. That was the steepest decline in its history up to that point. And Jonathan Cahn is warning that he's concerned about, something major, a shaking of some sort happening, this one being a real big one coming up. So whether he's right or not, and whether we should take that beyond the limits of just Hebrew history, I think there's something to it. And I think the Lord's had me with these guys for various reasons, because what they're doing is they're pointing towards the urgency of 2015, the urgency of the hour. And what I'm able to do is say, well, look, if you guys are right, and if something's about to happen, we have to look to the Bible for the biblical prophecies that seem imminent. What are the ones that could happen? What are all the ones that have all the details in place right now, where it would not take much, one fire into the straw that would get it to blow up and start the wildfire in the Middle East? And that's, I think the Lord has had us together for these reasons. And I'm just very concerned, guys, that we're going to see world-changing prophecies happen real soon, and we need to make sure that we understand what these prophecies are and what their intentions are, and how they will point to the fact that there is a God, there's only one God, a one true God, and the way we're going to prove that is because what's going to happen has been foretold centuries ago, and no one else can taunt that saying or qualify themselves by saying, I knew it was going to come. I'm the one that told you about it. Who am I? I'm the one true God. I'm the one true God who cares about you, who wanted you to know about this stuff, because I saw it coming down the pipe. I saw it 2,500 years before it came. And so, he's not going to sit there and look for a standing ovation. He doesn't need that. He's going to look for us to come to him in groves and go, thank you, God. Thank you for making yourself revealed here, because we need you more now than ever.
Wow. And that's, exactly. My goodness, the prophecy in action, to be sure. And you mentioned the blood moons, and it just seems like, and we've had Jonathan Cahn on and Mark on, and talking about all of this, and it just seems, Bill, like everything, there's this convergence. Now, whether or not, as you mentioned, whether or not the blood moons have a significance beyond we could see what happened in history, but we don't know. But certainly things are seemingly lining up here to really change the course of history. And
everything's pointing to prophecy and what is laid out in the Old Testament and New Testament. I do have a question for you pertaining from the article you wrote today, the Operation Wake Up Call, and I believe you're very accurate when you write this, that human hearts have been hardened, deception has blinded international eyes to enormous suffering. And we've talked about the Christian awakening in many other war-torn countries throughout the Middle East and in Asia. What about America? We see I'd say a remnant of the church become awakened and really step away from any orthodox faith aside from what is written in the Bible. Do you see a much bigger awakening before things get bad here in the U.S., or do you think it would have to get bad before there is a true, real big remnant in the church that is awakened?
Well, I'm not real hopeful for the church, at least as it is in America. One of the problems the church in America has, I feel, as I travel around and speak at these venues, is they think it at large is the representation of the body of Christ. And that couldn't be the farthest from the truth than you can imagine, because the Acts 2 model of the church, where God is involved in the building of the church, is going on in Iran and the Syrian refugee camps and China, India, places like that, through God's efforts to these supernatural means. The growth rate, I'll give you an example. I told you that Iran is the number one growing evangelical population in the world, growing at a rate of 19.6%. Well, the same Operation World Research comes out and says that America is growing at a rate of 0.08%. We're not growing, guys. Even though we've got more Bibles in our houses than we can imagine, And one Chinese person would love to get their hands on at least one of these Bibles because they would kiss it as if they were kissing Jesus' feet. We're not getting what's really going on, in my estimation. There's a remnant, of course, in America. There's people listening to your show that are very interested in this stuff. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that America gets with the program and there's a revival of sorts in here. I think there will be pocket ones where the pastors of the church are really on fire for the Lord and the prophetic word, and they're teaching the evangelistic message out there. But generally speaking, the church has gotten very purpose-driven, social gospels. It's becoming very emergent. There's even crazy, bizarre offshoots where you've got Chrislam, where they're trying to join Christianity and Islam at the hip, as if it's the same God, the same religion. It's really getting bad. And as far as I'm concerned, America is, it's probably going to be among the other world at large I mentioned in the article that's asleep and going to need a wake-up call. And then maybe we'll have some more revival in a broader level where we can sit there and say, look, your life has now been affected extremely adversely. And now will you get a clue? Now will you understand, church, that, this isn't about prosperity and feel-good messages. And, I'll give you an example, and I'm going to be okay with saying this. I think there's like 40,000 people that attend Lakeview or Lakewood Church in Houston with Joel Osteen.
Right.
And I guarantee you they've not heard any of this stuff. And so they go in, and Joel's such a great teacher, and he's on TV, and he'll tell them about, great things, motivations and prosperity things and all that stuff. But the thing he needs to talk about, and I believe he's going to be held accountable for it on some level, is the stuff we're talking about, because Bible prophecy is about a third of the Word of God. There's about 10,000 verses out of the 31,000 in the Bible that are devoted toward Bible prophecy. It certainly must mean something to God, or he wouldn't have put that much emphasis on it. And so when these things happen, like, for instance, nuclear disaster in Iran, which was written about 2,500 years ago by Jeremiah, or the destruction of Damascus, probably a nuclear weapon taking out Damascus, written about in about 730 BC by Isaiah, or Psalm 83, where now all of a sudden, at the very least, the world is affected adversely. Probably economies can collapse, and who knows what it's all going to amount to. At that point, the guy that's been going to Joel's church, that's been fed with this motivational stuff, is going to go, whoa, that's not working for me anymore. I'm in serious trouble now here, and I'm not so sure my pastor knows how to respond to that or give me the right message. And, maybe that's when people start to wake up. But right now, a friend of mine is one of the leaders of the church in Iran. He's pastors over about 4,000 Christian leaders over there, and it's underground, and I can't mention his name because he's a high-profile target for the Iranian government. In fact, I'll be Skyping with him on Wednesday. He's over here in America temporarily. His wife, who came to know the Lord through a healing, a miraculous healing. I want to tell you the story if we have a moment. Her name's Padina. For our purposes, we can't give her name either. Let me tell you the story, and then I'm going to tell you what she said, because it's going to answer your question, Joe. And she made the comment that about the Church of America after you hear this story. To tell you real quickly the story, she was raised devout Muslim, as most Iranians are. Remember, most Iranians are under 35, meaning probably about 70 or 80% of the population, meaning they weren't born at the time of the takeover of the revolution in 1979. So they were the victims of it, the products of it. But they're not. A lot of them aren't very happy. They're very disenchanted because it's failed to meet its promises, the Islamic takeover. And so and the suicide rate in Iran as such is very, very high. I think it's number 2 in the death rates in Iran. Behind heart attacks or things like that. So suicide is rampant over there, and so is drugs, by the way. And so she was disenchanted, raised Islam, did her prayers 5 times a day, all the things you're supposed to do, read her Quran, hated Christians, all the stuff they teach them over there. She chanted death to America, all that stuff. But she was so disenchanted with Islam, she was so unfulfilled, still being a Muslim, she wanted to commit suicide, which is very symptomatic over there, like I said. The problem she encountered initially was that she was taking care of her mother, who had multiple sclerosis. Now, this is a true story. It's called Padina's Story. That's not her real name. And you can watch it on YouTube. And I would highly encourage that your listeners go to YouTube and type in Padina, Padina, apostrophe S, story, Padina's Story. And the story goes that she told her mom she was going to commit suicide. And her mom said, wow, how's she going to take that? And her mom says, well, you can't leave me here alone. It's going to have to be a double suicide. You're going to have to kill me as well. True story. So Padina was going to commit suicide. Well, Hormoz Shariat, who is the founder of Iran Alive Ministries, is on satellite television 24 hours a day, and he's reaching out through satellite television saying, if anyone out there wants to commit suicide right now, please call me. Well, so the mom calls him and starts talking, and they're praying to Jesus, and the mom's starting to cry. And Padina's going, what are you doing? You're going to assure a problem for you with Allah by doing this sort of stuff right now before we're going to commit suicide. This is the worst thing you could do. And so ultimately, Padina's not wanting part of it. Her mom convinces her to get on the phone with Hormoz Shariat. And she's very resistant. Hormoz talks to her for about an hour. She's not going to change. She's going to commit suicide. And Hormoz finally says, look, give Jesus one chance. You can commit suicide next week. Just give him a week, pray to him, see what he can do for you, and if nothing happens, then you can commit suicide. You can do it in a week from now. And she goes, okay, I'll tell you what. I will give Jesus a week, and I'm going to come back on in a week. My mother and I are going to be on your TV show. I'll be on the phone, and we'll commit suicide in front of your audience. And this is one way I can glorify Allah in my death. So there's the gauntlet. There's the challenge. There's the gauntlet. Now, this is in Jesus' lap now, okay? And so she wakes up the next morning, Padina, and she hears the gentle scuffling of her mother's footsteps racing throughout the house. Now, her mother couldn't walk. Her mother had MS, real bad, severe case, to the point where suicide might have done her a favor. And so Padina grabs her mother, is in shock. This is the next day, 24 hours. I mean, we're not talking the whole week here that was promised to Jesus. So Jesus got real busy real quick. And she takes the mom, to the doctor. And the doctor goes, well, she's healed, Padina. This is a miracle. This is unbelievable. We need to know what imam you were praying to that brought this about. And Padina's in denial. She's going, no. This is not right. He goes, oh, it's right. She's healed 100%. She's walking, and she don't got MS anymore. So he says, now you got to tell me. You're obligated to tell me what imam it was so we can give credit to him. And she goes, well, we weren't praying to an imam. We were praying to Jesus. So, of course, at this point, they became Christians. Now they're apostate Muslims because you become a Christian. Now you're an apostate Muslim. So Padina comes over to America for a while. And she works with Hormoz Shariat, and she actually marries this guy I'm going to be Skyping with. Mansour is not his real name, but that's who we'll call him, Mansour, who was a prime disciple of Hormoz Shariat over here. And they get married. And Padina is working at Iran Alive. And she goes up to Hormoz Shariat after a period of time and says, Hormoz, you've been so wonderful. You've been like a father to me. I've met my husband through you, but I've got to tell you, I've got to thank you for the work. But I've got to go back to you, and I've got a witness over there. And Hormoz said to her, well, why would you do that? It's pretty much a death sentence. And she goes, well, I'll tell you, Satan is singing lullabies to the church in America right now. I need to go over where God's active. I need to go over to be with my people. I don't care if it costs me my life. I felt I was dead already in Islam. So that's my concern. That's why I even quote that in the article that you've been talking about. Satan is singing lullabies to the church over here. The church is not cognizant of how doped up and asleep it is with the concerns that it's so conformed into the world right now. And of course, I'm not speaking about every Christian, there are certain Christians who are clearly plugged in with the Lord, and they're following His Holy Spirit, and they're reading His Word, and whether they understand prophecy or not, they're saved, they're on fire for the Lord, and all that sort of thing. I'm not talking about them, but I'm talking about the composite of the overall body of Christ. It needs to be very careful, because it's not in tune, it's not in step with the movement of God and what it's doing in the world. And because it's not bearing good witness to the rest of the world that doesn't realize there's a God, that there's one true God. And so we are at a point right now where God's going to make that known. He's going to take matters into His own hands, like He's been taking matters into His own hands with the prophecy, with the miracles, dreams, visions, and healings. His prophecies have been reserved for that very purpose, for this very time. And that's where we're at right now.
You know, the account that you just gave, it makes me smile. It makes me tear up. It hurts. It gives me a joyous heart, and it also hurts my heart, for obvious reasons when I think of the church in America. And folks, I mean, please re-listen to that account that Bill gave. I mean, my goodness. Wow, what a powerful story. What a powerful account. God bless them, and it makes you think, and it certainly makes you, well, it does make you think. Bill, you're being very generous with your time. I've got an email here from, and I want to get this in before, while we still can here. Email from Charles and Margaret, listening live from Leipzig, Germany. Met you in 2014, Orlando. We were there, of course. Wanting to know, Charles, both Charles and Margaret have read your book, Revelation Road, and folks, Revelation Road is another book Bill wrote. It's a really it's a unique reading experience. It's a novel and biblical commentary. Now, having said that, they both read that book, and of course they had picked up your Psalm 83, book in Orlando. Now, what they want to know is this. You've covered a lot of ground tonight, and I'll just summarize their question here. If you could lay out what you believe to be, or your best guess scenario of maybe like an event timeline, and I mean no dates, but just like a sequence of events based on prophecy, what would it be? I mean, tomorrow, next day, a month from now, whatever. What would be like the first thing you would expect to happen, and then subsequent events from that point forward? If you could paint us a picture.
Okay. Hold on one second here. Let me get into. They'll be happy to know. And they'll be happy to know that I'm going in. Go ahead.
I just want to say they want to know based on your research. Having said here that they respect your research immensely and feel that you've been right on the money with all of your writings. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, they'll be happy to know also the sequel to Revelation Road is half done. The novel is pretty much done. I'm just going through the editing. It's called Apocalypse Road. That, just so I can plug the book here for your listeners
Sure.
here, is what I felt the Lord wanted me to do, and I wrote Revelation Road in 2012, and I was going to follow it up with a sequel right afterwards, but came out with Psalm 83, the book, and then this new one, A Nuclear Showdown. I felt the Lord wanted me to do those meanwhile. I believe the Lord wants me to do, and it started with Revelation Road, was to take the prophetic material, the prophetic information, and put it into a real-life situation. So we've got a family in the first part of these books. It's a novel that are experiencing the prophecies. In Revelation Road, they experience Psalm 83 and part of Ezekiel 38 as it stage sets, and a few other things. I don't want to give it away because it's a great book. But my goal is to write 3 books that lays out sequentially the prophecies as they appear to be set up to happen, and how they would affect this family as they go through all these prophecies from now until the second coming of Christ. So to paint the end time story into a picture, because we can talk about these things and they're very interesting, and they're very, for lack of a better word, they can be very entertaining. But you know what? They're life-changing events, and how will they affect a family? How will the pedal hit the metal? This is what I was trying to let people know. And also, what happens when the church is raptured? What about the information people need to know that are left behind? So that's actually what Apocalypse Road gets into, and that book is almost done. Now, to answer the question, hopefully it'll be out by the end of the year. They want me to have it out by the summer, but I'm a little concerned about that. If things go crazy in the Middle East, there's no way. But the sequential scenario. Okay, here we go. I'm going to lay it out there. You tell me if you think it's far-fetched. And I'm not making any predictions, and I'm certainly not going to be held accountable for this. That's my caveat. And I'm going to tell you also that I believe that the church gets raptured. I believe in a literal rapture, that Jesus is going to come without warning. He's going to whisk his bride, the church, to be with him forever in heaven. And that's going to be an amazing thing for a Christian, but it's going to be just a dreadful thing for the world that's left behind, because then everything gets really bad. You start getting into the Antichrist scenario and all that stuff. Now, I believe that's going to happen before the Antichrist comes on the scene. I write about why I believe that in Revelation Road. And I believe that could happen at any moment. And I believe that Paul taught that for 2,000 years ago, but we're 2,000 years closer right now. So at any given moment, God could take us out of here. Jesus Christ could come get his bride in the twinkling of an eye, whisk us up into the clouds to be with him in heaven forever. And the main teachings on that are in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. So for those who are not familiar with it, you should read about it. Now, that is, no one knows when that's going to happen. It's an imminent event. Nothing had to happen before it for it to happen. The only thing I'm saying is it will happen before the tribulation period, and I have a whole bunch of reasons I put forward for that teaching in Revelation Road. Now, what could happen meanwhile, though? Now, I'm going to tell you, I think there's a possibility that what I'm about to tell you will happen before the church is raptured. Doesn't mean the church couldn't be raptured before, and I hope it is, but we could be here for these things. One, I think Jeremiah 49, I think what's going to happen next is Jeremiah 49, verses 34 through 39. I write about it in my book, Nuclear Showdown in Iran, and it's that prophecy dealing with Elam. I believe it's dealing with a nuclear scenario. I believe it's going to be amazing when it happens. It's going to affect people adversely. Could lead to economic collapses, terrorism, major terrible scenarios in the Middle East. And I think that may be prompted by Israel striking Iran's nuclear sites. I think that's what that prophecy might be talking about, although it doesn't specifically tell us who strikes Iran's nuclear facilities, but it appears to be dealing with their nuclear program, and it appears to be a military scenario. Could be an earthquake. Iran has 90% seismic, but it looks like, as it talks about, he'll send the sword after them. It primarily alludes to a military scenario. I think if that happens, Iran will not, play rope-a-dope. I think they're going to come after Israel. I think they're going to come after them with all they got. And I think they're going to come after Israel through Hezbollah's 100,000 rockets to the north. Syria will get involved, even though it's in shambles right now, and Hamas will get involved. And Iran will get involved. And if you have that happen, you got a really big issue, because you're talking about hundreds of thousands of missiles. Recent reports came out and said that Hezbollah, the next war with Hezbollah, Israel is prepared to receive 1,500 missiles a day. Now, to put that in comparison, or into perspective, in the summer of 2006, there was a 34-day conflict between Hezbollah and Israel, and 4,000 missiles were lobbed into Israel by Hezbollah in 34 days, but many Israelis in northern Israel into bomb shelters for a whole month, basically. And now they've got 100,000 missiles. 1,500 a day is not going to happen for Israel. They cannot stop that. And we're not talking about Katyushas like Hamas has been firing in. Hamas fired 3,000 missiles in this past summer over 50 days. Israel withstood that. They had their Iron Dome defense system and all that, but they will not be able to withstand the type of missiles that are very advanced that can hit anywhere in northern Lebanon to anywhere in southern Israel with marksmanship accuracy within a 20-yard radius of its target. You could see Ben Gurion Airport, the nuclear sites of Dimona struck. You could see major malls in Israel. You could see Tel Aviv become a disaster. And this could happen in a matter of a week. And Syria's got serious weapons. Supposedly, they're developing nuclear stuff again. If you start seeing that happen, because Israel can't fight a war of attrition, they will do something deadly. It'll be a prison rules fight. And I would suspect that you got another prophecy that would follow, and that would be the destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17. Isaiah 17:1 says, Damascus will cease from being a city. It will be a ruinous heap. It will be reduced to rubble. That has never happened in history. We're told in verse 9 of Isaiah 17 that there's desolation because of the children of Israel. So we find out who's responsible, and it's the IDF. And then we find out in verse 14 of Isaiah 17 that it happens overnight. It says, one evening you'll see Damascus, but in the morning you won't see it anymore. And that's not bow and arrow technology. So that could happen. Then I believe that's going to prompt Psalm 83, because that's when the Arabs will go, okay, if they're going to take out Damascus, what makes Mecca and Cairo and Beirut and Amman, what keeps us safe, and how are we going to allow them to do this? We need to put together a unified force. Already Egypt has advocated through the Arab League. This happened in Egypt at one of their last meetings. They want to put together a united Arab force. They want a united Arab force because they want to stave off the terrorism that's burgeoning throughout, especially like with ISIS and stuff. But the united Arab force is indeed what seems to be part of Psalm 83. That's a collection of Arab countries, probably terrorist populations as well. So I'm thinking these things could happen. And I believe that when they happen, they could happen real quickly, one right after the other. But there could be a little lull, because God might give the church the opportunity for people like ourselves to come out and explain what just happened, because people are going to have a lot of questions, and they're going to want to hear the biblical perspective. Fox and CNN, they're only going to give them the geopolitical and the analytical and military perspectives. The biblical perspective needs to be known, because the literal fulfillment of Bible prophecy will be something that God will need full credit for, and awareness will need to be made. So that's one of the reasons I think we could be here for this. And then after that, Israel can dwell securely without walls, bars, nor gates, can be very wealthy. And I think that's the prerequisites for the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And that's the big one. And I don't think the church will be here for that. And because it's about God withholding them. So those are the things I'm watching for. Other ones can happen within that. Isaiah 19, dealing with Egypt, verses 16 through 18 are very interesting. So I'm thinking prophecies are coming.
Wow, the entire scenario that you painted. I mean, you've been very consistent from day one in terms of developing these. I'm not sure exactly how to frame it, but just mapping this out. We look at the headlines. We look. In fact, I was reading your book earlier today as well. Just kind of as a refresher, nuclear showdown in Iran. Looking at the headlines of the last several months, and it just seems like everything is just coming to this convergence of events. And boy, we have to be paying attention, don't we? We really do.
Is it going to go away? I mean, this is the question your listeners need to ask themselves. Is it going to get better or worse over there? I mean, is Iran going to say, okay, we will stop, we'll cease our nuclear program? Will ISIS say, okay, we'll go away because Jonah came and talked to us and we want to repent? No.
No, not at all.
These things are going to get worse. Ever since the Arab Spring came, see, here's the thing that the listeners need to think about here. The big turning point was when the peace talks collapsed at the end of 2010, and the world woke up in January of 2011, and the Arab Spring happened. And at the time, the pundits, the liberal pundits, were saying, well, this could be a good thing. I mean, this is a youth bulge that, driven by the social networks of Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, are looking to the pursuits of life, liberty, and happiness. I mean, wow, we could have democracies over in the Middle East. And, but sure enough, they're looking at these things to happen, but that's not what happened. And what I was saying at the time is, look, You saw these leaders leave. Mubarak was gone after 32 years or whatever, and Medina Ali in Tunisia was gone after decades, and Muammar Gaddafi, almost 40 years, I think, in Libya, and then Saleh in Yemen. All these guys were just falling off the trees, like the leaves were falling off the trees, and they weren't really good guys, but they were not the kind of guys who were going to go to war with Israel. So what I was saying is, look, we need to look at Daniel 2 verses 20 through 21, which says, it's the Lord who changes times and seasons, and he removes and raises up kings, and he gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those that have understanding. And what we saw was a season of change, an irreversible season of change in the Middle East that has imploded the Middle East ever since. And we saw different kings and leaders being removed and raised up. And now we've got a menu of really bad kings over there and leaders. Hassan Nasrallah with Hezbollah didn't go away. Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran did not go away. Bashar Assad of Israel did not go away. So you've got really dangerous individuals over there that it wouldn't take much for them to culminate to come together against Israel. So I look at the situation. I see it's imploding. I see that Israel's enemies have been degraded. Syria is not as big a threat to Israel as it used to be before the Arab Spring. Hamas is not as serious of a threat. I see that the battle zone has been cleared out so that when Damascus gets destroyed, there'll be millions of people who won't be destroyed therein, that they're now refugees. Unfortunately, for many of them, they're hearing the gospel, which they wouldn't have heard about otherwise. They don't want to be refugees right now, but they'll be thankful they're not incinerated when Damascus goes up. I look at this infighting with the implosion with Islam, which is allowing many Muslims to say, what is this nonsense? I want out of this religion as quick as I can get out of it. So you see all these things that are working geopolitically and spiritually over there, and it's not getting better. It's not going to go away, and it's going to culminate in war. I mean, you'd have to be blind not to realize that this is where this is headed. Something's going to happen, and it's probably going to be a prophecy at this point in time, not another regional conflict like the Hamas. It's liable to be the big bonanza.
Wow. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The news headlines deciphered or viewed through the prism of biblical prophecy. Very well researched and well studied biblical prophecy. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, to really look at this and to realize that we, Bill. I mean, to me at my age, to realize that we are the generation, or could very well be the generation to see all of this take place. That the culmination of 2,000 and 3,000 year old prophecies. That's something.
Well, and that's the thing, Doug, that we have to think about here is that when we talk about end times Bible prophecy, are we talking about one prophecy happening and then another one happening decades later or centuries later? Because when you look at the church age, there has been the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD. Jesus predicted that in Matthew chapter 24. We've seen the rebirth of the nation of Israel. That was in 1948. There's been other ones I could point to. But it's not been like, rapid fire prophecies. The last prophecy was 66 years ago in 1948 with the rebirth of Israel. There's hints of a prophecy stage setting in 1967, of course, with the takeover of East Jerusalem. So now the Jews can build the temple, the tribulation temple. There's going to be one. But even that was roughly, 40 years ago, 50 years ago now, roughly.
Right.
So, I think when the next one happens, and it's going to happen, I mean, we're already seeing they happen. When it happens, it's probably not going to have a lull of 66 years between the one after it. I think when one happens now, it's like dominoes. They're all going to happen. I think the illusion Christ gave us in Matthew 24, verse 8, about birth pangs is a sign of the end. That when the prophecies start to happen, and Jesus Christ is about to return for his second coming to set up his messianic kingdom, it's like a woman in labor. In other words, she's going to have the baby. He's coming down the birth canal now. He's starting to crown, and her contractions are not going to go away. Matter of fact, they're going to become more intense and they're going to become more frequent. And you're not going to be able to stop the baby coming. And that's what we got. I think Jesus is getting ready to come. He's going to set up the messianic kingdom. It's drawing very near. And, the contractions are going to be huge. The tribulation is going to happen. These wars are going to happen before that. I believe the church is going to be taken out of here before, because we're not appointed to the wrath of God. And, so I'm thinking that once the next one happens, it's the world's, it's going to evidence that the world's over at this point, and we're going to be going through the prophecies, and they're going to happen in rapid succession. Will there be only 7 years left of tribulation? No, not necessarily. It could be longer. Won't be less, because we know that there's a 7-year tribulation period, Daniel's 70th week, in chapter 9 of Daniel. But it isn't the rapture that creates Daniel's 70th week. It's the confirmation of a false covenant between Israel that's confirmed by the Antichrist in Daniel 9, chapter 9 also. So what we have is the church could be out of here. You'll have this interim period of time that's unspecified. We don't know how much time will happen. Certainly powerful events will be in there. And then you'll have a 7-year tribulation period. Could the tribulation start 24 hours after the rapture? Sure, it could, but it's doubtful. Could it start 20 years after the rapture? Sure, it could, because you've got to have a world religion established, the harlot world religion of Revelation 17. But I doubt it's going to be 20 years after the rapture. But we don't know. We don't have a specified time on that interim gap, that gap that happens after the rapture but before the tribulation. But we're at a point right now where whether we've got 7 years left after the rapture or 10, 20, 50 years after that, in the scheme of things, that's not very much time.
No, not at all.
I like what you wrote in your article. Don't be alarmed, be alert, and that's a very great way to put it, because these things should not have us being alarmed. They should have us, happy that they're coming to fulfillment, and we're, closer to seeing the Lord reign here on earth and to the end of this. And we're told, look up, for your redemption draweth nigh, and for this we should be happy, and we should be happy to see the Christian population growing in these other countries. And it's going to get bad. We're going to see things happen and go through times that are shocking to many in the global arena who are paying attention. But this is all working for his better good.
Well, the thing is, Joe, and I'm going to just quote a little bit from the article, because you make a really good point. I say, according to Isaiah 46, the Bible prophecies will authenticate the sovereignty of God, because only He can declare the future as if it had already become history. And then I write, this is impressive. However, why does the Lord really present us with knowledge of the future? I am convinced that it is because when the Word of God finds prophetic real-time application, it awakens us to the reality that there is only one true God. Moreover, it declares God's great love to us. The Lord wants us to know what world-changing events are coming so that we can prepare for them. Most importantly, our natural response from receiving this invaluable prophetic information is to be gratefully responsive to God, who's the giver of this timely information. So the Word of God finding application to fulfill Bible prophecies give us the wake-up call we need to realize that He loves us and cares for us. See, that's if you look at prophecy from that perspective, you're going to be excited about it. You're going to go, wow, I love God. I love this information. I'm so thankful that He's imparted that to us, so we have that information. Now, I will tell you, in the article, I think it's worthy of just quoting this, for those of your listeners that have hung in here for almost 2 hours now. I believe this is a possible word from the Lord for us. And I believe it's, here's how I preface it in the article. His disposition about the current heart of humanity and its correlation to chaotic world events. Here's what I believe is a message. The anger of the Lord is aroused. His marvelous works are being met with the harshest resistance. Without just cause, the afflicted are affected, and many now find their hope and trust in the Lord. Through their distresses, they have become acquainted with the Son of God. The battle zone has become His harvest field, but now the battlefield has been made ready for the wars to come. The prophecies are coming. What's next? How will the world learn about the Holy One of Israel? Human hearts have become hardened. Deception has blinded international eyes to enormous suffering, but the Lord has not turned a deaf ear to the cries of the needy. He has heard their pleadings, traveled to their hostile lands, and joined them in their weeping. He has left His unmistakable mark wherever He has been, and there is nowhere he will not go to meet them in the time and place of their need. Through means unimaginable, miracles, healings, dreams, visions, and more, the hopeless have been delivered through their distresses. But how will the world asleep awaken to such a great love? The people unsuspecting will experience his holy word in action. Some of the ancient prophecies have been preserved for our time. At this right time they have been revealed. The time of their fulfillment is come, and through them the people's attention will be attained. No longer will they look the other way. The prophecies are powerful and will testify of the one true God. And I believe that's a message that the Lord would like us to hear right now.
And what a message that is. My goodness. Thank you for that. And Bill, thank you so much for your time tonight. Is there anything that we did not cover that's on your heart that maybe you feel that we should mention before we cut you loose?
Well, I think we've covered a lot. I think it's really important. I think that my concern would be, since I think a lot of your listeners are Americans, is it safe to say that the largest preponderance of your audience are Americans?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
I would say that God is crying out to America. I think He wants us to realize within this country that how much love He has for us, and that He's been trying to wake us up, and He's given us remedial judgments, which is typically what He would do. These are biblically something we can have precedent. He has been giving us remedial judgments. He's been giving us prophetic voices to try to warn us. And He's been giving us the leaders we deserve, which testify to the fact that we are heading downward really rapidly. We are under judgment, in my estimation. We've had since 2000, 2001, our crown of protection, hedge of protection came down. With the towers being toppled, we've entered into 3 different wars as a result, in the Middle East. So actually 4 if you want to put in the scenario with what's going on right now with Syria, Operation Inherent Resolve. And, so when we look at the remedial judgments we've had a flurry of them that have come. We've had our, I'll just mention them sort of sequentially to see if they resonate with your listeners. We've had our worst costliest disasters in 2005. Category 5 hurricanes. Hurricane Katrina was our worst costliest. Hurricane Rita was right after that. Matter of fact, I just taught in Ohio. So many places I forget where I'm teaching from. But they had experienced that Category 5 Hurricane Rita right there in the Logan, Ohio area. No, that wasn't where I was. Where was I? I was in southeast Texas. Logan, Ohio was before that. Excuse me. Southeast Texas and Orange, Texas. Then we've had the worst tornadoes in our nation's history in 2011. Hundreds of tornadoes came all at one time. We've had the mortgage meltdown in 2007. The economic crisis in 2008 created global economies on the verge of collapsing, not to mention our country. We've had our worst oil spill, BP oil spill in 2010. There's nowhere safe in America anymore. You think the first grade is safe at Newtown, Connecticut, the Sandy Hook massacre. Newtown, Connecticut was hailed as the safest town in America. The Boston Marathon massacre in 2013. Where do you go to be safe anymore in this country? I think God is warning us. Look, we're getting what we asked for, right? We've had prophetic voices come out. Jonathan Cahn with the Messenger of the Harbingers. He's been warning us that this country is under judgment. The presaged signs that happened to the northern kingdom of Israel are playing themselves out even here, that we can see them in his book, The Harbinger. You've had other prophetic voices like Joe Rosenberg wrote a book called Implosion, and excuse me, Mark Hitchcock wrote a book called Lake Great United States, and Terry James wrote a book called American Apocalypse. And, those are not sugar and spice and everything, terms. Those are, dangerous terms for this country. And then the question is, do we have the leaders we deserve, which is sort of the final icing on the cake when we talk about that stuff. And I would just ask your listeners, and these are things I'm going to say that our current president is proud of. I'm not trying to bash him. I'm just saying he's actually proud of these things. He repealed, right when he came into office in 2010, Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military. He came out in 2008 and said we're no longer just a Christian nation, but a nation of Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, Buddhist nation, a nation of non-believers. Of course, we were founded as a Christian nation. He said same couples should be able to marry in 2012, May 9th, 2012. And 2011, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, Secretary General, said we can no longer defend the constitutionality of DOMA in this country, which is one man should be married to one woman, which is biblical. I mean, that's what the Bible says. A man shall leave his parents, cleave to his wife. The wife shall do the same. What God puts together, let no man set asunder. But we can't defend the constitutionality of that. And so, I just ask our listeners, have we been getting the warnings? Have we been, from the prophetic voices, have we been getting the remedial judgments? And do we have a leader that is primed for the downward side of this country? Dick Cheney came out. Former Vice President Dick Cheney just came out. It was on the news recently. And he said if you wanted a leader that would actually bring down this country, you wouldn't have to look further than Barack Obama. I'm sort of paraphrasing what he said. You may have heard about this on the news just a couple nights ago. And so I'd ask your listeners, is that where we're at? These are things he's proud of. And these things are irreversible at this point, in my estimation. Homosexuality is not going to go away, folks. And it's usually the last thing in the decline of an empire, is the immorality and the homosexuality. And it's in Romans 1, right? In Romans 1, how God judges the nation. First, they're given over to immorality, sexual immorality. Then they're given over to homosexuality. And then they're given over to depraved minds. And to a point where Isaiah tells us be wary when a nation calls good evil and evil good. And my closing comments to your listeners is I'm sincerely concerned about this country, but I'm sincerely concerned about you as an American, and especially if you're an American Christian, is that this is a time right now where walking with the Lord, growing in the Lord, being a light in a dark place, because as this gets darker, your light will shine brighter, and God will put you into positions where you can glorify Him. We're told in Ephesians 2:10 that we are His workmanship in Christ Jesus, created for good works, things prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. God is preparing things beforehand right now that you as a believer are going to be able to walk into and bring glory to God, and to share His love with people who need to hear about that love. And these prophecies are going to give you the opportunity to do that. And you don't have to wait for them, because you can talk about them now. That's what I'm doing right now. They're coming, and when they come, you'll say, hey, look, they came. But you can also say, hey, look, they're coming, and people need to be aware of them. And so that would be my closing message, guys, as we close out the second hour, that, it's time for us to let the lights shine so brightly. That's what we're called to do. God's going to take us out of here, and when He does, it's over. I mean, we can't do anything from heaven. We've got, some of us got books out there, and as long as the Antichrist don't burn them like Hitler did, they'll be helpful. But we've got living, breathing epistles of Christians right now on this earth for a little bit of time that need to redeem that time and be called to evangelism and holiness, because the hour is very short.
Amen. Bill Salus, thank you so much for your time, but thank you so much for your fellowship, and for your efforts, and for your grueling schedule where you're traveling to everywhere, it seems, to spread the message, and you're doing a great job. And also thank you for your wonderful books, including your latest, from Psalm 83 to Nuclear Showdown in Iran, very topical, and all of the books before and after and in between. I just want to say thanks for everything and your gift of time tonight, my friend. Thank you so very much.
Thanks for having me on the show. Boy, it's a great opportunity to lay all this stuff out. You guys give us a great platform.
Well, anytime, Mr. Salus. God bless you, my friend. You take care, and until next time.
It's fantastic.
God bless.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That was Bill Salus' website.
My goodness, that's great.
ProphecyDepotMinistries.net. His latest book, Nuclear Showdown in Iran. and you can get that book from his website or from Amazon.
He's got DVDs too. In fact, we have them.
We do?
Yes.
We got to find them.
No.
You know where they are?
Yeah.
And you're hiding them.
Yeah.
I swear, you have this back
secret
room
stash, right?
Yep, and he puts all these boxes up of other, old books and mail, makes it look like there's nothing there, and behind it there's just this big. I should go back there and look more often because you do have stuff back there.
Well, folks, what a great interview with Mr. Bill Salus. We're going to be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour on this Monday, April 13th, 2015. And this month is seeming to be flying by just like they all do. Just takes a little bit to get going sometimes. We are going to hit some news this hour, possibly take some calls, maybe not. But if you do want to call in, just in case you do, it's 661-244-9839.
There's just so much news to get into, Joe. I mean, folks have even following the news. I would urge everyone not to get clouded or get mesmerized by this volleyball tournament of presidential candidates, whether it be Hillary or Jeb Bush or Rand Paul. In the end, can there be any man that will get us out of this situation we're in? Now, obviously,
and even if there was, would our votes even be counted?
Exactly. No, that's not to demean or to minimize the importance of the political.
We have a long way to go.
Yeah, we do. But it just seems like, man, all of a sudden, it's kind of like the sports, baseball. They're having spring training when the snow's on the ground, and they're playing when it's snowing. They're playing the playoffs or not, the World Series. It just seems like the seasons are getting longer, doesn't it? Anyway, but just don't let that mesmerize or captivate you or entrance you, because there's so much more going on outside of that.
There's a few articles I saw that were interesting. This is from Bloomberg Business. Saudi Arabia's plan to extend the age of oil. It talks about the world's dependence on crude oil and the biggest exporter watching the prices plummet and trying to make money off of their oil reserves by holding it back. Last fall, as oil prices crashed, Saudi Arabia's petroleum minister, Ali Al-Namei, the world's de facto energy czar, went silent. He still popped up, as it is his habit, at industry conferences on 3 continents, yet from mid-September to the middle of November, while a benchmark in prices plunged 21% to a 4-year low. Namei didn't utter a word publicly now. It goes on to say, for 20 years, Bloomberg reports in his May 2015 issue that the world's $2 trillion oil market has brought Saudi Arabia some troubling signs, and they go on to say that they had similar crises with the Asian financial crisis in 1998 when the global economy melted down, and when the global economy melted down 10 years later. It goes on to say that the reserves in Saudi Arabia will fall very low in profit ranges if they are sold at this dollar range, and how they need to raise the price of oil before they want to let their reserves go. And I know you talk about the petrodollar a lot, and what we see here is Saudi Arabia is our petrodollar country, our main partner over there, and it has a lot to do with what Bill Salus was just on talking about with the Middle East. We have OPEC, the nations of countries who put together one of the largest market shares of oil supplies, and we have it over there in this volatile region. And here it goes on to say that the Saudi Arabian Empire wants to expand their enormous wealth growth through the continuation of supplying the country with energy from Saudi Arabian oil.
Right.
And they say that they want to do this at a time where demand and prices are at a peak, which this is not the time. They even go on to say in this article that Saudi Arabia tried to bring an increase in the price of oil by cutting their supply short. How much, if Saudi Arabia wanted to, could they really control the price of our oil?
Well, it depends on who you ask, and that's a great question. And I'm not sure if it's.
I couldn't find that. I mean, you find different quotes from different statistic agencies. Even the government, I don't trust their findings either. But
well, one of the things, and this is some of the research that we've been doing, or that I've been doing, and I don't think I've shared this with you. And if I have not, I'm sorry. But one of the things that I see taking place right now is the Saudi oil wells are in trouble, and I saw one report, and it was a very obscure report, obscure source, where the main oil wells of Saudi Arabia, under Saudi control, are pumping more water than they are oil. You're talking 80-20 or even 90-10, 90% water. The process is this. Very simplified. You pump water in, and you get oil out.
Yeah, and they say that this article says the production is more than 9 million barrels a day, and it's that's at the end of 2014. It was 9 million barrels a day from 6 million barrels 5 years ago, and that the peak oil prices, they say that Saudi officials were bracing for global demand levels to level off at 2025, but the price of oil is $60 to $70 a barrel. They want to push the peak demand back at least 5 more years. And this according to Bank of America research. And they say such a delay would be bad news for renewable energy companies and the climate change agenda, but this will not stop the global tide of rising oil consumption, they say. And they're not sure that it could be pushed back, the peak demand.
And I'm not even sure it's going to be relevant based on the events that we're seeing take place today, because once more, I think we have to really pay attention to this, at least in my view, based on the research I've done, is when you look at Saudi Arabia, and don't forget how Saudi Arabia was formed. It was formed as a result of our Western intelligence, our CIA or OSS and British intelligence getting together and seeding the royal family, giving them land in the country, and creating the Aramco, and going back into the early 20th century. Saudi Arabia is really a product. The country and the family is a product of our intelligence in our military. And now what we're seeing take place is this, and I do believe in part that the Libya the situation where Gaddafi was toppled, in addition to, all of the obvious things about the central bank and the gold and such, and the weapons running and such, I do believe that if you look at Libya, where is the oil production the greatest, and that would be the eastern part of Libya, and who controls that right now? Well, I think factions or proxies of, and this is an oversimplification, but of Saudi Arabia. But looking at the Saudi oil, you're looking at cheaper or less expensive cost to get it out of the ground. So when people say, well, we've got oil here in the United States, yes, we do. But how much does it cost to get that oil out of the ground? It's called lift costs, and that has to factor in. Lift costs are different in different parts of the world. So now, having said all of that, and I think this is what Bill Salus was talking about, or this segues into or Bill Salus segues into this, if or when the dollar does collapse, one of the dollar is really, they call it a petrodollar for the obvious reasons, of course, that the oil is traded in U.S. dollars. However, what's the dollar backed by? Some people will say nothing. Most people say nothing, and they're in a basic sense correct. But the U.S. dollar is backed by our assurances, the assurances of our military to transport the safe transport of oil and energy all to the Western world. That's what keeps the dollar afloat. Now think of something happening in the Strait of Hormuz or one of the three choke points over in the Middle East, which could very well happen and likely would happen should Israel strike Iran or should something happen in the Middle East. That will, in fact, create a situation where we, the United States military, may not be able to continue, especially at our current rate of decimation by the regime. We may not be able to assure the safe passage of oil and energy throughout the Middle East. So that would take out the U.S. dollar very quickly as the world's reserve currency, as well as it would end the Ponzi scheme. And some people clap and say, "Oh, this is great. The Ponzi scheme has finally ended." Well, no, not necessarily. I agree that we have to stop that. We have to stop the Ponzi scheme known as the Federal Reserve. However, you don't replace it with another one or a worse scenario. So I said all that. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that and you see other alliances as well forming now for the supply of oil. It's in addition to the power structure in the Middle East, so too is the precious metals as well as the oil.
All right. And I mean, oil prices here have been, or gas prices here have been stuck at $2.59 for about a month.
That's the gas at the pump.
And I was just wondering, as I haven't seen a change in that, it kind of got my attention today, as well as this article did out of San Francisco from Yahoo News. IBM teams up with Apple on artificial intelligence health program. I'm going to read the first couple of paragraphs here. You got to listen to this carefully.
Okay.
IBM on Monday announced alliances with Apple and others to put artificial intelligence to work, drawing potentially life-saving insights from the booming amount of health data generated on personal devices. IBM is collaborating with Apple, Medtronic, and Johnson & Johnson to use its Watson artificial intelligence system to give users insight and advice from personal health information gathered from fitness trackers, smartphones, implants, or other devices. Goes on to say the initiative is trying to take advantage of medical records increasingly being digitized, allowing quick access for patients and healthcare providers if the information can be stored and shared effectively. IBM wants to create a platform for that sharing. President John Kelly said, "All this data can be overwhelming for providers and patients alike, but it also presents an unprecedented opportunity to transform the ways in which we manage our health. We need better ways to tap into and analyze all of this information in real time to benefit patients and to improve wellness globally." IBM expects more companies to join this health platform, which envisions growing to a global scale. In addition, New York-based company said it's acquiring a pair of healthcare technology companies established in IBM Health Unit. IBM Health Unit. Watson is a cognitive computing system that bests human competition in Jeopardy trivia television game show. Under the partnership, it will be able to handle data collected using health applications from Apple mobile devices, according to IBM. IBM's secure cloud and analytic capabilities provide additional tools to help accelerate discoveries across a wide variety of health issues. And that's the end of the article. So I read the whole thing there.
Well, if I can interject,
and we see these every day. These articles every day. Something about this, transhumanist, technological, immortal life. Technology meets man meets computer conscious into our future.
Yeah, and Steve Quayle was taken to task so many times. I mean, I understand why Steve Quayle says, "Man, I'm tired." He was the leader of the pack in talking about this transhumanist movement, and he was front and center in reporting on things that we're seeing 20 years ago, where they were seeing happen today. So I understand that. But I think, Joe, I think that one of the things that people listening to this broadcast tonight, I had done a lot of research this weekend, and that's why I've been doing a lot of research, and I'm looking at everything that we're seeing, and all of these headlines, the titans who want to defy death, what we're seeing right now is Paul McGuire. By the way, Paul McGuire is going to be on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so folks, mark your calendars for that and tell tell everybody, because it's going to be a great show. But in his book, Mass Awakening, and A Prophecy of the Future of America, both, the move toward this transhumanist singularity is, the gloves are off, and I mean, we're skidding down this runway so quickly. But one thing I want to mention is part and parcel to that, the components to that, is the surveillance grid, a total control of society through surveillance and through technology. The privacy and dignity of our citizens, well, it's being whittled away sometimes by imperceptible steps. This is a quote I found by former U.S. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas. Okay. Taken individually, each step may be of little consequence, but when viewed as a whole, there begins to emerge a society quite unlike any we have seen, a society in which government may intrude into the secret regions of a personal life. Now, the reason I mention that is part of the transhumanist movement breaks down into the stripping away of our privacy. Did you know, folks, on Facebook, and this is something, let me just grab my note here. This is something that I learned this weekend, I knew the extent of this, but I didn't, I knew of it, but I didn't know the extent of this. There, that noise you heard was just dropping the research. Where'd it go? Oh, that must have been the one I dropped. Yeah, here it is. Right here. Let me reach down to grab that. Facebook. It's the biggest the biggest repository of facial recognition. Every time you, ladies and gentlemen, or your daughter or your son or your niece or nephew, whoever, posts a picture to Facebook, that is stored in a government controlled data bank. And you've seen the boxes pop up when you mouse over a picture or you bring up a picture on the internet on Facebook, especially on Facebook, and it says, "Who's this?" Have you seen that? Of course you have, if you've been on it. And people dutifully type in the name of the person. For higher profile people, it doesn't really make a difference. Joe and I are on there, and it's automatically, it fills in who we are. Okay, but I like to protect my family, and I'm sure you folks want to protect yourselves and your family, so never do that. But Facebook, the biggest repository of facial recognition on behalf of the federal government, they're actually giving, or I should say selling, that facial recognition or the images to our federal government. Amazon, $17 billion they were given to create an intelligence cloud. There are 17 intelligence agencies that are involved in the data mining from Amazon and also from Facebook. The technology is equal to control. Okay, and I just want to say that as we proceed toward the promise of singularity, as you talked about in that article, we are also subjugating ourselves to a massive technological control and the technotronic era, as discussed by Brzezinski. Brzezinski knew exactly what he was talking about in 1970. When in his book, The Technotronic Era, as well as, what is it, between two, Joe, you knew about the between two ages, anyway, in his books. But the people, the globalists right now, are pushing us toward this. We are being pushed toward this mandatory, and I mean mandatory, technological subjugation. just think about that, and also think about that in terms of, in terms of as we see things happening here in the United States or in any Western country, in terms of being able to buy and sell. You think you're going to be able to buy a house or buy a car or get medical care without subjugating yourself, your privacy, to this technotronic era? You're not going to be able to do that. People talk about, living off the grid. Well, that's fine for right now, but maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now, that's not going to be possible if you want to be a part of the normal civilization. I just thought I'd bring that up. Biometrics is big time right now. It's being employed everywhere. Mobile scanners. I'm telling you right now, and we've given up our Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights as we've never been in such a position before. The facial recognition software I referenced, the FBI's $1 billion next generation identification. It's folks, if you want to look this up, it's NGI. It's their NGI system. It expands the government's current ID database from a fingerprint system to a facial recognition system. So think about this real quick. You're driving down the road, and this is how it is in some places, and this is how it will be in a very short period of time. You're driving down the road. A police officer has the equipment in his vehicle, scans your license plate, up on the computer screen, pops from the federal repository, pops your face, your identity. It will tell where you live based on the integration of GPS within the vehicles and other data, surveillance data that's collected, where you've been, where your car has been, at least, whether you own a firearm or firearms plural. So before that police officer even stops you, he'll know just about everything about you. And this is compliments of places like Facebook, Google. Every Google search is cataloged, logged. Every search term and this is, to me, this is hard to believe.
Did you see the article the other day where it said Facebook accidentally tracking non-users?
Oh, yes. And there's no accident to that.
No.
So please understand that computers, as efficient and, if you believe they're efficient, but please understand that everything you do is being tracked. Your groceries that you buy through the loyalty cards, and if you don't have a loyalty card, through your debit card, and if you use cash, okay, well, you might get a pass there, but not too much longer. So what we're seeing is a fully operational total surveillance system that rivals what we see. Well, that goes far beyond 1984, but we're witnessing a noxious mix of technology, information, and we, ladies and gentlemen, everything we do, it seems like, especially on the computer, everything we do, we are playing right into this surveillance system. And the writing is on the wall. Technology is moving so fast. The assaults on our freedom and our privacy, they're occurring with ever-increasing frequency. There is really no hope of turning this back in the technological sense. None.
No. The Pandora's box is open. And we did an interview today with Daniel Holdings, which will air on Monday, on a station. Wednesday, I'm sorry. Today's Monday. I'm ready for bed. Hebrew Nation is the name of the show, Hebrew Nation. And that will air on Wednesday, actually, when our show's airing. But it was a great
we
hour
talked
and a
about
half.
Jade Helm, right?
Yeah, we talked about Jade Helm and kind of branched off into some other areas towards the end there. But it was a really good show, and we'll put those links, make those available whenever we get the links ourselves. And one last article here, and then we can take some phone calls in the last half hour. Pope Francis effect leads to exorcism boom. I found this very interesting. Pope Francis effect credited with demanding rise for exorcisms around the world, and they call these the dark arts, the actual exorcism. And the wording of this article kind of got me. The Pope Francis effect has been credited with encouraging a resurgence in faith among rank-and-file Catholics, but it has had more of an unexpected consequence, a boom in the demand for exorcisms. Now, it goes on to say here, Argentina's pontiff's fire and brimstone language and frequent references to the devil has helped propel belief in Beelzebub back into the mainstream of the Catholic Church, where it was once an embarrassment. Dioceses in the UK, Italy, Spain, and elsewhere have noticed a dramatic increase in the number of people claiming to be possessed and to have responded by training by more priests in the dark arts of how to perform exorcism. A week-long exorcism conference held this week by the Pontifical University of Regina Apostolorum in Rome and endorsed by the Vatican is being attended around 160 Catholic priests from around the world who insist that demonic possession is very real. Pope Francis talks about the devil all the time, and that certainly has raised awareness about exorcism. One father, a Mexican priest, trained in this school of exorcists, but all Latin Americans have this sensibility. For them, the existence of the devil is in part their faith. And it goes on to talk about the Catholic Church and how they've, it says, until a few years ago, a significant number of people in the church did not believe in the devil. But now they're going back to the scriptures and finding out that, they say that the devil is real. And it goes on to talk about this increase in the rise of exorcisms, but they call them the dark arts. And it goes on to talk about the film, which was played, the role was played by Anthony Hopkins, and he was a Jesuit exorcist who runs an exorcism course in Rome. The Rite. It was from 2011. But it just caught me. It says training more priests in the dark arts. Now, if there was a real demonic possession that a priest got rid of, would that be considered a dark art to you?
A dark art?
Yeah. This is apparently from the. It's not the writer's own words. This is a term apparently applied to exorcisms, which got me thinking: are they? I don't know if you read in stories in the Bible where Jesus says, the devil can cast out devils and other people, but just Satan casting out his own, and that's not really a miracle.
Well, I don't think that's the case.
I mean, to me, it can be in a lot of cases.
Well, I would.
The people that are quote unquote possessed are bad, or it speaks to me more of the leadership and all the words that they're using around these terms. They're paying the devil more homage in this article than they are.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
and they talk about an increase of black magic and Satanism and the occult in the church, and they're even warning, exorcists warn Vatican over beautiful young vampires and satanic yoga. That was another article out today, stemming from the same topic.
Interesting.
But they said there's a huge rise in these in the Catholic Church.
Well, and I think as we see this darkness take over the West, it troubles me greatly to see to see ISIS and it troubles me greatly to see this evil, this pervasive evil, just grip all of the West. The entire world, but specifically the West, and part and parcel to that is demonic possession. But even without that, I mean, look at what Bill Salus said too. We are drifting into this immoral abyss, the abyss of immorality, the abyss of sinfulness and of debauchery. It's incredible the rate of decline that we're seeing. One thing I did as well too, and I think this is notable, when I was doing research, looking at how homosexuality and the occult are tied. and go back to Nazi Germany. Well, it goes back before, obviously long before that, but really was refined during Nazi Germany in how the really how homosexuality, and this is something that because of the upcoming Supreme Court decision, and we're going to be getting into this in a different show. What I found, and folks, maybe you already know this, but I think to refine this a little bit more is important. As we look at the 3.5 or 3% of the homosexual activists out there, or the homosexuals, and look at the activists behind it. The question I always had was, how can 3% or 3.5% control 97% of the population? Well, one of the, as I was doing the research, and I don't mean to drift here, but I think it's important. If you understand socialism, if you understand the Fabian socialists, if you understand what the Fabian societies, Fabian socialists stand for, and even the communists. And this is something I didn't know until I really looked into this. You'll find that socialism and LGBT rights are connected at the hip. They've got a very long and incestuous relationship. Prominent socialists. They were involved in early struggles for lesbian, gay, bisexual, or lesbian, homosexual, transgender rights. And people like Oscar Wilde, Harry Hay, Bayard Rustin, Daniel Guerin, among others, were part and parcel to this. Sexual politics of utopian socialism comes into play. So when you look at, and this is something, if you remember a number of years ago, Glenn Beck was talking about the Fabian socialists and the Overton window and all of that. I didn't hear him talk about this. I didn't talk about the mixture of sexual politics of utopian socialism, about the modern socialist thought that really emerged in Europe in the late 1800s. The early 1800s through the late 1800s. Let me rephrase that. The late 19th century. How's that sound? I'll just stop there. But utopian socialism, folks, go ahead and search those terms, because this plays an important role in the transformation of our country. It goes beyond the spiritual, although that's obviously a big part of it. But it's one of the communist dictates. We know about the 45 communist planks that were read into the congressional record back in 1963. This goes even further. It gets back into the architecture of the of the Fabian socialists, and this explains why the left, the progressive left, is so intent on advancing the homosexual agenda, because this is part of the communist conspiracy. Remember, I think it was Comintern during the McCarthy era. Probably not. Joe, you weren't. I mean, okay. Anyway, there's a term now called, or there has been a term called Comintern, or Homintern, depending on how you want to pronounce that. What this is and McCarthy had identified this. McCarthy suspected that there was a homosexual activist underground that was abetting the communist influence and infiltration in this country. This is important history now. That was referenced as Homintern, which was a play off Comintern during the McCarthy era. But the reason I mention this is, please, everyone, I think it's important for all of us to understand that the just as McCarthy was ridiculed for his work in fighting communism, and some people will say, well, he created this fear out of the communist infiltration. I look at it a little bit differently. I look at the communist infiltration as being a component of, an essential component of the creation of the New World Order. And part of that infiltration also has subsets or parts to that as well, one of it being the homosexual agenda, the other being eugenics, Darwinism, abortion, the destruction of the family. All of these fit together like puzzle pieces to advance this one world agenda by ripping out the moral fabric of this country. And there's not one politician, and there are very few pastors and churches that are addressing this, because this is still going on today. Now it's going to be before the Supreme Court. Do you know how this is going to play out? I don't think anyone will be surprised when the Supreme Court rules that or elevates, and these are my words now, elevating homosexuality to a protected special status. This will happen. It's going to, I don't see any way around this. This will happen. And when that does, not only will the components of this one world order take a giant leap forward because of the destruction of the United States, the morality of the United States, and the makeup of the United States, but so will the wrath of God and God's judgment on this country. That will take place. So all of this is happening at lightning speed. And will this be concurrent with something in the Middle East? Certainly would appear that way. Anyway, and I think it's important for us to really put all of these puzzle pieces together and just understand that the ground we're standing on right now, or the ground you're sitting on right now, is fracturing right underneath you. And that's why we're playing, too, these, if you've noticed, the faith to action clips, the commentaries.
Mm-hmm. Those are at the top each hour.
Right. And I contacted Faith to Action. In fact, Janet Folger Porter, I think is her maiden name or married name, wrote the book The War on Christians. And she's got her website, faithtoaction.org, F like faith, 2, the number 2, A.org, F2A.org. And I asked her, I said, can we play these? Because you're very proactive in restoring or at least fighting this agenda. And she said, sure. Graciously said yes, graciously allowed us to do this. So, and that's a very worthwhile organization. And she's doing a lot. They're doing a lot to, fight this radical agenda of depravity. I didn't mean to monopolize, but I think all of this is important because as we set out, folks, to here it is, Monday, April 13th, 2015. We're going to see so many changes take place in the next couple of months. People are going to be enjoying the summer. They're going to be distracted. Of course, all the distraction and the white noise, the chaff of these meaningless stories about this candidate did this and this candidate did that. Don't fall into that trap. Look at the very important stories that make up what's really going to change or affect all of us individually and collectively.
All right. Let's take a call. We have some callers on hold. We're going to go to 626 area code, and it's not John. 626, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. 626? And they dropped off. 843, we're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Thanks for holding.
Hey, Doug. Hey, Joe. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Fellow Erie-ians, I used to live in Conneaut Lake, 45 miles south of you.
That's right. Conneaut Lake.
Glad you don't live there anymore. It's going downhill fast.
Oh, boy, don't you know it. Now, I live in South Carolina now. Nicer weather.
Yeah, I'll take that over Conneaut Lake. But by the way, the roller coaster, well, Conneaut Lake Park burned down, so.
The blue streak. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't want to hold up your line too much longer, but my great grandparents used to run a bed and breakfast there, and all the big bands would stay there and play during the night at the ballroom. That's what burnt down.
That's right. Yes. Yep. Wow. That's okay. And there were some big names back in the day.
Oh yeah. Count Basie, Glenn Miller, all those guys used to stay there. And Max Baer, the boxer, my granddad, which was his relatives that had the restaurant, used to tell me how Max Baer would come in there, and my great grandmother would have to smack his hand and keep him off the waitresses.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Anyways, going to your guest tonight, I'm so glad I caught it because if you ever get a chance, you got to watch the Jim Bakker show. He's had a lot of those guests, Tom Horn and them on too. And today, I think it was Tom Horn was on today, and they were talking about the CERN collider. And I've been trying to tell my mom about it and people at church. They kind of look at me like, I'm way out there. And my mom, I walk in, she goes, "You guys see this? They're talking about that Hadron Collider you were telling me about." And they're describing how they're trying to open different portholes and try to let something come in and maybe send something in. And I said, "I try to tell you, Mom, all the preachers, Pastor Bagley, the Hagmans, everybody's had these people on saying they're messing with stuff, and all the stuff that Jesus is talking about, it's coming to life rapidly."
Absolutely. And to the naysayers about the CERN Hadron Collider, all you have to do is simply show them an image or provide documentation of the statue of Shiva. That's really the mascot of CERN. That should tell the people everything they need to know. For crying out loud, But sometimes, look, it took me a long time to really become awake and understand things. So we have to be patient with people. But it's great that they're. Everyone seems to. The knowledge is flourishing, which is great.
Well, I know you got some more calls. I just want to say one more quick comment. I know when I hear talk like True News, Rick Waddle, and everybody's talking about the fluffy, puffy religion. It's like when we were kids, you go to school, Sunday school, you were taught about the Lord, and you heard a sermon and that. And I understand those things are good, but people are still kind of stuck way back in that. They're not caught up to what's going on in Revelations and the reality of all the stuff that's coming to light real quick. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. You know why though? It's number one. It's uncomfortable. If you can go to Starbucks, once or twice a week, or even once a day, and you can go to the mall, and you've got a house, a car, a job. Who wants to really upset their worldview by getting into prophecy? The comfort level that you've got to leave, you've got to exit from is. Well, that's just too much. So, and people say, well, conspiracy, Bible prophecy and conspiracy, that's a big business. You know what's a bigger business? Prosperity gospel. That's a bigger business. Oh, yeah.
You know what? I used to be real big watching a lot of Christian TV, and I hear you. It makes you sick when they start saying, if you just give that $1,000, you're going to be taken care of. There's nothing mentioned about Christ, nothing about his coming back, not being accountable to sin. It's just prosperity, and it just sickens my stomach.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got your finger on the pulse of current events and things going on, and you're awake, and you're helping to awaken others, and I think that's great. And plus you left the dregs of Conneaut Lake to South Carolina, so you're even better. That's great.
And just so you know, and I'm not trying to rub it in, we got an awesome farm league hockey team down here, the Carolina Stingrays. They won 23 in a row, and they hold the record for the most wins in a row in a farm league.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I do hope that you keep tuning us in, and God bless you, and glad to know you're from our area. Keep in touch, my friend.
Yes, God bless you both, and keep up the good work, and I'm going to keep telling people about you that they need to get tuned in and pay attention to what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Have a great night. God bless.
Bye-bye.
And we go to another caller that's been on hold for a while. We're going to go to 561. 561, we're coming to you now. You can
hello.
Close out the show tonight. Good evening.
All right, this is Phil McKenzie. I'm glad you mentioned Shiva. You know, the mentions in the Bible Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. That's basically the unholy trinity. And when they did the whole, you know, God came and confounded the languages, they came in different names, like the Egyptian, Osiris, Isis, and Horus, or the Grecian, or Greece, Zeus, Athena, and Apollo as the sun, you know what I mean? And then India, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The Roman one, Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. Just so people get a different perspective of what Nimrod was to all these different nations. Afterwards, and what Shiva is, a part of an unholy trinity that is not of God at all.
That's true. I mean, you look at the occult nature, the Babylonian, Egyptian, or whatever occult
mystery religions.
Yeah, I mean, you can see this. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think to some extent we need to understand, and I really do. We need to understand history in order to understand what's taking place at present, or at least have a working knowledge so we can be somewhat conversant when we're talking with people and trying to awaken them.
Right, and the basis of history for any historian is the Bible, which the 60s, I think it was 1963, Kent Hovind mentions in some of his DVDs or whatever, that they took the Bible out of the schools, and then crime rate went up in all senses of the word, every type of crime, at least 10 times, within 2 years of taking the Bibles out of the schools. Like, people need to wake up. The Bible's reality, whether they like it or not.
Amen, brother. Amen. Very well said. All right. Fantastic. Thanks for the call. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good night.
All right. You too, man. You know, it's just to be sure, Christianity will be criminalized in the United States. Just in case anyone has any thought that it won't be, okay? It's already on its way to be criminalized, Christianity, and any dissension of or any talk about or any criticism, I should say, about Islam, that will be outlawed. We know this. The cultural war, okay, is really being waged at this point at the level of the Supreme Court, at the lower courts, and we've been infiltrated by a bunch of communists, communists at the very least, but occultists, pagans, the spirit of Antichrist, I suppose. And I think that's where we have to really understand that, what we find in the balance is where the fight is at. It's at that level. Anyway, I didn't mean to kind of stray off there, but Joe, go ahead.
No, that's fine. And I think we only have a few minutes left.
Yeah, we've got to just. In fact, let me just, if I can, just take a few minutes to do two things. I want to say hello to Nate, a new listener. Nate, God bless you. Thank you so much for your email. We do read every email that we get. I want to say thank you for the emails that you sent. I'm working on trying to respond to so many. The other thing is I just want to thank each and every one of you. We want to thank, Joe and I want to thank each and every one of you for everything that you we're behind on sending out notes and emails and such, but we read in the notes, the letters, the suggestions, the material that you send has done so much to help us, not just inspirationally, but informationally as well. Just want to say thank you for being part of our extended family. Thank you for being there for us. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your financial contributions. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for telling others about this program.
Thank you for emailing previous guests that you guys want to have back on, like Bob Fletcher, who we're going to call tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Who said that he received a high volume of emails asking Joe, if we're going to come back on.
Yeah, and Bob Fletcher's great. Steve, he was on with Steve Quayle last time, I think. But anyway, but we don't. Sometimes I think that we don't say thank you enough, and we really want to say thank you, because without you, we wouldn't be here, and we're here only because of you and by the grace of God, and that's it. And if you could do one thing for us, I mean, we're working extremely hard. Just keep us in your prayers with respect to we're trying to maintain our viability once if the internet goes down, or if they rearrange things or shut things down or whatever. We're working hard towards finding the solution, or working hard toward that solution.
Towards having a solution.
What's that?
Towards having a solution or a way.
Right. I mean, we've identified what we want to do, what we think we need to do after praying about it, but it seems to be just still out of reach at this point. I mean, I don't know. It's still a fluid situation. Just keep us in your prayers, because what we want to do is be obedient servants, not only to God, but be good stewards for you, and provide you with the information that you deserve and you look for, and you hopefully come to expect, the quality of information. And we need resources to do that, and so we're working toward that end. And I just want to say thank you, but prayers are appreciated in that respect. But anyway, that's it.
Until tomorrow, Standeo. Stay safe. God bless. Have a great night.
Good night.